Blank check with Griffin and David. Blank check with Griffin and David. Don't know what to say or to expect. All you need to know is that the name of the show is Blank Check.
I think she's starting to suspect something.
Who?
Your podcast.
Okay. Long break there. You really took a breath. That was
Because I did the
several
lean
beats.
in. I tried to do the lean in.
Yeah. You did the.
It's
you
such
couldn't
a
change your
visual.
face.
Yeah.
And you didn't do it with the Southern accent.
Your podcast.
Your podcast.
That line is how I learned something about Michelle Pfeiffer's range. Because that line, there is like a slight Southern accent to that line. I guess the girl who died was Southern. Because I don't know if it's Amber Valletta's character. I don't think she's Southern. And so, but you're supposed to know that it's someone else talking, and it's just one line spoken with that Southern lilt, and Michelle Pfeiffer couldn't do it.
Well, but then I wonder, see, here's my question. I wonder, is that Amber Valletta doing the line?
Could be, I suppose.
Dubbing
Maybe they
it
sub
over.
her in. I'm reading that she was raised in Oklahoma. So she, that's the South, right? I know that's sort of a, South Midwest, but it's the South.
It's even weirder that she can't do a Southern accent then.
You know what's even weirder? What's arguably the weirdest? That this was like an $80 million star-driven prestige horror film released in the middle of the summer, and that was the money shot in the trailer. That is the shot that made this one of the 10 highest-grossing films of the year, which seems so low-key now.
I want to correct you. Its budget is listed as $100 million, which is, I assume everyone just got paid out because...
Yeah.
It's a very nicely apportioned movie, but you don't see $100 million here.
No.
Yeah, because it made triple that. It made $300 million.
Big hit. Big fucking hit.
Yeah, and it, but I saw that one of the expenses was there were 5, the bathroom had 5 sets. There were 5 builds of that bathroom. So there could be a bathroom on both coasts. And then I was just like, that's just indulgence. But you don't need to build 5 bathroom sets. It's just a bathtub.
That's what this movie feels like. Not only is everyone getting paid their maximum quote, but also Zemeckis is like, here's how I want to do everything. And I want to do everything in the most extreme control obsessed way.
But no, but it didn't feel like a Kubrick thing. It didn't feel like I need to have the right red door. It felt like we are all at a point in our careers where we need to have ultimate comfort. Like it being on both coasts felt like we can't make anyone inconvenienced for a second, and none of our stars can ever not feel comfort. And so we have to build a bathroom set wherever they are happening to be vacationing.
The other thing is, because I feel like now, for how big of a hit this movie was, it's not talked about very much. And I think its longest lasting legacy is just, it's the movie shot while Tom Hanks lost weight during Castaway. Mm-hmm. And so I was like looking into that, the scheduling of the two movies against each other. And it seemed like, unless I'm misreading this was an 8-month shoot.
Wow.
It's a long time.
Which also costs a lot. That costs a lot.
Yeah.
Is it that it was an 8-month shoot, or was it just an 8-month break in between? Like did this really take that long to make?
That's no, because this is where I'm trying to figure this out. I believe it was a full year break in Castaway, and this took up 8 of those 12 months. That's what I think I read, but it was hard to get that confirmed.
There's so little written about it, too. I feel like it's been like erased from history in every way. It seems like no one involved once is invested in its legacy whatsoever.
It's almost like this movie went missing and no one can figure out what happened to it, as if my husband is trying to cover something up
by leaving careful clues.
I think it doesn't have much of a legacy, although I don't think it's a disliked movie, right?
It's a forgotten movie.
It's maybe a little forgotten considering the size of how big a hit it was, but is it also, I mean, no spoilers, but is it also the only movie where Harrison Ford is a villain ever?
I think so. David, you've become incredibly blurry. You look like the poster for Michael Clayton.
You look like John Hamm in the Christmas Black Mirror.
Yes,
at the end of that episode where he gets blocked.
Right. I don't know if it's Zoom or my camera, but it has started to do this occasionally. And if I just turn it off and on, it stops. But it just blurs me out as if I am, like you say, worthy of censorship, essentially. Like if I am like testifying on CNN, but my voice is going to be really deep and I can't like show my face.
It's really disturbing because that White Christmas
weird.
episode is the most haunting thing I've ever experienced. And I thought you guys this was a thing that you guys did.
That I was being ghostly.
Or to like let the other person feel like they had the stage. You just blocked yourself. I don't know how your partnership works.
It's constantly evolving. I mean, honestly, like all great marriages, it's constantly evolving. We keep secrets from each other, and we gaslight each other into thinking that the other one is going crazy by assuming that ghosts are real.
Did you see this movie when it first came out?
Yes.
I saw this movie for the first time last night.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
I saw
That's
it in
interesting.
theaters. Well, Griff, introduce our podcast, introduce our guests, and then let's talk about this.
No. Starlee, don't apologize. That's what we like. We like
Yeah,
when
we like
talk
it. It's but now
they're introduced. What's terrifying to us is if a guest is sitting there waiting to come in and we're going like this. Come in.
That's not me.
Not you. This is a podcast called Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
And it's about filmographies, directors who have massive success early on in their careers are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. And sometimes those checks clear, and sometimes they lie beneath baby. And this is a mini-series on the films of Robert Zemeckis, the famous Bobby Z, and we've gotten to what lies beneath kind of his biggest clear year. He has 2 of the 10 top grossing films of the year in 2000.
Yes.
He makes 2 massive star-driven films that both hit hard. Castaway, more critically beloved, I feel like has had a longer legacy, although it was not the major Oscar play that people presumed. This movie, I was surprised. I had forgotten, kind of trashed by critics at the time. People kind of shrugged it off, but was a huge popular success.
People dissed it at the time, which in retrospect, I'm like, if something like that, I mean, we say this all the time in this podcast, but if something like this came out now, critics would be falling over themselves, being like, he's paying homage to a great director. He like controls the camera. He's got movie stars and he's deploying them. Like, this is great. Like, why can't Hollywood make more of these?
It stars people over the age of 50. A studio's releasing it on 3,000 screens in the middle of July. Like everything about it would be catnip.
At the time, critics were just like, we get it, Bobby. You've seen a Hitchcock movie. Like they were just like, you know, jerking off. I mean, it's a clear, and I don't think this movie's a masterpiece, although it has its defenders, but it is the clearest sign of it's a good example of how things have shifted in 20 years.
No, what are you going to say? I'm
I
curious.
don't know when the talking is supposed to happen.
Introduce our guest, Griffin.
All times. Our guest today, from Election Profit Makers, writer on Search Party, Starlee Kine, who we said in an ad read we should have on the show. We were thinking out loud. We were doing an ad read for the Shivering Truth, an Adult Swim show that both you and I were voices on, Starlee. And while doing the ad read, we were like, oh, we should have Starlee on the show. Why haven't we done that? And then we, of our infinite organizational capabilities, never reached out to you. You reached out to us and said, hey, I heard you guys said on an episode that you should have me on the show. I'd love to do the show. We went, oh yeah, no, that's a good idea.
That's the only time I've ever done that. I've never done it. But I felt fairly safe because it had been put out. It had been put on record.
It was on the record.
Also, shout out to Kat Solon, who is, I know the Shivering Truth, Vernon and Kat Solon. I know she listened to this show, so I want to shout out to her. Great work.
Very good. Kat Solon, who rules. Shivering Truth is really, really good too. We did ad reads for it, so then I feel like people are like, well, you're on the show and you did an ad read, you're just shilling for it. But I genuinely really like it. It's a thing I think is very cool that I'm part of. A small part. It's a bug nut show.
Surely my part is smaller. I just say like 3 sounds. I don't even say full words on Shivering Truth.
But you've been on multiple episodes now,
I've been on one. No? I think I've been on one. It was the first season. It might even have been the first episode of the first season. And it's literally, I think it's like my bra straps are getting snapped and I'm just making sounds. I do not believe I say words.
That rules. Well, to be fair, so I mean, you said this is the first time you've ever asked to be on a show. I think this is the only time we've ever talked through guest booking ideas during an ad read. So the honor goes both ways. But I messaged you and I said, would you want to do What Lies Beneath? And I think your line was, you said, I've only seen it once, but it's the kind of movie I wish I were watching all the time.
That is true. Yes. That genre of film,
yes,
I find very relaxing, and it pains me that they used to be made all the time. And the way they used to be made defied critical thinking so that you could just relax and not really care if they were that good. And the predictability is comforting in a Law and Order kind of way. Law and Order the show, not the concept. And
although we love Law and Order.
We do. We tweet in
the
all caps all the time. Law and Order.
All the time.
Yes. Yeah. And they don't do these kind of movies anymore. They're very, very few and far between. And I feel like that's a loss. And I also think that's why if this one came out, it would get so much of acclaim, not because it necessarily deserves it, but because we would just be so excited to have we would be so excited to have a movie like this again, and it would be better than the ones that are made now.
Totally. I just kept thinking while watching this movie, if this were to be made tomorrow, it would be made for a streaming platform, or it would be made independently at a much smaller budget. And it's not to say that couldn't be good, but there's something about, like, weirdly, while you watch this movie and you're like, how did it cost $100 million? You also kind of see the money on screen just with the patience of the movie. Like, this movie has the energy of, they were given time to do everything very deliberately. And even just the ease of, they're relaxed enough because they had 4 bathtubs made. Like, it comes across in the energy of the movie, where you feel like something like Gerald's Game, the Mike Flanagan movie, like the stuff he's been doing for Netflix is just like, I guess that's like the closest equivalent to like this kind of thing today. The other horror movies that get released, like the A24 stuff, feel more gonzo, you know?
But there's that genre in between, because Gerald's Game, I watched that hoping it was going to be like this. And Gerald's Game is kind of, it's gross. It has all that stuff that happens. It's so not relaxing. So I didn't feel protected. And it kind of...
It's too gross.
Yeah, it's too gross. I think Netflix has a lot of these that we now know are so bad that we don't even turn them on. There are theater releases that will have like Jennifer Lopez, maybe.
Yes.
I feel like I hear about ones coming out and they're always like The House Next Door, but I know already that they're not going to be, not even at this level, but the level even slightly below this that came out during this time.
Well, yes.
What was the one with Dennis Quaid, Griff? What was it called?
The Intruder.
The Intruder.
Yeah, they're all that.
Right. Right, there's Screen Gems releases. They're a lot trashier.
And it was made for like $8 million. Like, you know, they made that as cheaply as they could, as quick as they could. They had some like name actors in it or whatever, but like,
it's also why I think Invisible Man got like high. Invisible Man is the equivalent of this that got better reviews than I think the movie actually was. But it is really good,
agree with that,
considering we have not had anything like that in so long.
Yeah, and that it also is a movie that like, its power comes from suggestion in the same kind of way. I mean, it's like baked into the whole premise, but it's all about the lingering fear and building the anticipation. And I don't know. I mean, I just feel like watching this last night, it's like the versions of this that are made today, whether they're the Screen Gems version where it's just going to be a lot more briskly cut, a lot more jump scares. They don't want to build
way
this
more
sort of
jumps. Way more jumps and way more like loud noises jumps, not just the classic, you know, pet jump, you know, right? Like a door moving or whatever.
Right. And even like the Netflix version of this would not be comfortable with this much silence, would rely a lot more on close-ups just because they know people are watching it on a smaller screen. Like, this is a movie that weirdly has the consciousness of, we hope that a sold-out crowd is going to see this on the biggest possible screen in the middle of July.
I saw this movie when I was 14 years old on a big screen, and it was so good on a big screen. I mean, like, and I was 14 years old, so I probably had not seen that many like kind of robust thriller grown-up movies in theaters yet. Like, it was still a pretty new experience for me, but it was just fun to be with a gasping audience, as twists are unfurled and so on.
You know what's weird though is this movie is gone from my memory. Gone. I was watching it, and normally you get traces back when you rewatch a movie you haven't seen in a while. Only thing I remembered was that Amber Valletta was in it. And I was like, I had a vague memory of people being like, Amber Valletta is an actress now. And it was during supermodel times when people thought about, I guess it was a little bit after supermodel times. And it was like, that was a bit of a buzz, and that was it. I couldn't remember anything. And then, so there's something like soundproof about it. It actually does not penetrate your consciousness.
I mean, yes. The only thing I really remembered is Ford. The end is the Ford being bad. That's the thing that kind of stuck with me.
I was surprised when I was reading reviews. Some of what I was watching, like the end when he keeps coming back, when he keeps not being dead. Right. I was
He's
like,
unkillable.
Surely this must be one of the first times this happened, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to. We know we can't do that now. But this must have been one of the first times, so that's why they were doing it. But then all the reviews were like, all this recycled stuff that we've seen a million times. So already by this time, it was made in 2000, right? That had already been done. And so what really have we been doing for the last 20 years? Because it feels like it feels like that was just yesterday that they started that trope, and we haven't come up with any tropes since then.
It's this thing I'm kind of obsessed with. I feel like I talk about too much on the podcast, but I feel like sometimes things that are effective get used so much that then the audience starts to like feel like they're smarter than it. Oh, it's this thing. I've seen it before. And then filmmakers start removing effective storytelling tools from their arsenal because they're like, well, I don't want to like give into the cynicism of I've seen this before. But they're not replacing it with anything new. They're just taking effective storytelling tools off the table. And it is that thing of just like, well, even if you've seen it before, like even if Harrison Ford does just become the Terminator in the last 20 minutes of this movie, it still is shocking. It still is
and scary.
Upsetting and scary. Yeah.
Just using him. Yes.
Especially using him. Yes.
It was the best use of him in the whole movie. Like before that, he was so dead feeling. And so it made me, it turned, and there was something, it actually felt like it was about something finally. The way he tries to kill her and the way she's running from him actually makes it the story of a marriage in a way that the rest of the movie actually doesn't do, because the problem with this movie is the writing.
This movie is so strange. I mean, just even talking about like its cultural legacy, and then we'll start to dig into like the meat of the film itself. But I was remembering, because I didn't see this at the time. I was young, but I also was terrified of movies. Like as much as I was a movie kid, any film that was trafficking in this sort of like a slow burn tension was fucking kryptonite to me. I didn't want to touch it because I was such an anxious kid. And not just like horror thriller films like this. We talked about this, or we talk about it coming up a little bit in the Castaway episode. But like I was even scared to see a movie like Castaway, where I was like, the plane's going to crash and then he's going to be fucked. Like I was like so nervous. Like I don't want this movie to get out of the point where his life is fine.
Didn't you feel that way? I listened to you guys Back to the Future. Didn't Back to the Future stress you out then? Because when I was little, these movies were comforting in a way that movies that just where the characters were feeling anxiety actually is what caused me anxiety. Things going wrong is what I couldn't handle. And that's why when I watched Back to the Future, all I wanted to do was get to it was such a relief when it all works out. But this stuff, it seems like two different, this doesn't seem as anxiety provoking.
I think it was the comedy cut it for me. I don't remember ever being stressed out about Back to the Future, although I was very invested in it even from the first time watching it. But I mean, this is like the most absurd version of the story that I've told before. But my dad had to drag me to see Austin Powers because I was terrified about the idea that he was cryogenically frozen. That was such an existentially terrifying concept to me. And my dad just wanted to see the movie and was stuck with my brother and I for the weekend. For the weekend, I say as if my parents were divorced at the time. It was just that my mom was like, I wake them up, I fucking take care of them all day. Saturday and Sunday, you have to do shit with them. But But like I remember, I mean, the same year, like U571, I think I walked out of because I just was like, I can't handle the tension of the fucking submarine's gonna go wrong.
Yes.
Like anything like that, any sort of disaster movie, it would freak me out. And I just remember being like, it's not like my parents said I couldn't see this movie, although they were protective. I was just like, yeah, no interest in seeing that. Looks too spooky. And then I after watching the movie, because I knew so little about it, it's talked about so little that I was like, okay, bathtub and the shot where she turns into the other woman. That's all I really remember from the marketing. Let me just watch the movie first, somewhat cold, and then let me watch the trailer. And it's bizarre how much the trailer kind of unfolds everything. I mean, Castaway's the same year where
Castaway's the same. Yeah, Zemeckis was like, who fucking cares?
Right, but I do think the movie actually holds up better if you're watching in a context where you haven't seen the trailer, or like you, Starlee, you don't remember anything that's going to happen.
And you know what? Everything I read about this movie says that he didn't care, and that he was just like, one of the reviews was like, he's over the shocks, he's phoning it in, he's rusty. He just made this movie in between making Castaway. This movie did not strike me as someone who didn't care. I thought this movie was very painstakingly put together, and that's not the problem with it. I think people don't have his number when it comes to this film.
Yeah, I don't think you can really, even his misfires now, I don't think that would ever be what I tag Zemeckis with. He's definitely very invested.
Yeah.
I mean, this movie I like. I think post these two movies, Griff, he often misjudges what is compelling about the story he's telling, maybe, right? Like I'm trying to frame exactly what it is that kind of like went off for him. I don't know. We'll talk about it with these later movies.
Oh, the phone. It got me again. Click. Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, what's up?
Hi, this is Peter Gallagher calling.
Peter Gallagher. Oh, you're one of my favorite actors. I love you, Peter Gallagher. You're star of...
I was saying, list some of my credits. I love to hear them.
Sex, Lies, and Videotape. The Player.
Of course.
American Beauty. You played the king, of course. Is that what you're...
Why not?
The OC. We loved you on the OC.
Yes.
You put in...
Andy.
You put in the work on Covert Affairs. People forget, but you did. Recently really enjoyed you in Palm Springs. Famously bushy eyebrows and good temperament. You're on Broadway in Guys and Dolls.
Pussy Willow.
Yeah, we love it.
Yes.
Anyway, what you calling about?
Well, I just got an alert. My ears were burning, and I heard that you were looking for someone who was Indeed.
Interesting. So you're talking about the 2002 Stephen Brill directed Adam Sandler vehicle, Mr. Deeds, which was a remake, of course, of Mr. Deeds Goes to Town, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Right. I heard that you guys were doing an ad for Indeeds, and I figured I was Indeeds. I might as well take the opportunity to promote myself, right? That is what this is an ad for.
I mean...
Some actor was in Deeds, and first come, first serve. I want to beat Eric Avari to the punch.
Wow, Eric Avari. I thought you were going to say maybe Jared Harris or Turturro, of course, but no, Eric Avari. Yes, you're the villain in Mr. Deeds, right? You're the mean businessman.
I am indeed, of course.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, no, we weren't looking for that, but you know what, Peter? You're a pro. You're a nice guy. Let's rap about Indeed. Okay. Maybe this has happened to you before.
Okay.
Indeed, the #1 job site in the world with more total visits than any other job site, according to ComScore. Yeah, they help you find quality candidates quickly so you can focus on hiring the person you need to keep your business going. So clearly, I can tell this is just something that happens once in a while, and I get it.
It happens actually with an embarrassing frequency.
Yeah.
But I'm realizing that I could use Indeed to find a job where someone does want someone who was Indeed.
Absolutely. That makes sense. And you could have full control and payment flexibility over your hiring. If you wanted to do that, you only pay for what you need. You can pause your account anytime. There's no long-term contracts. And now Indeed's new way of matching you with candidates instantly delivers a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job criteria. So you can contact them the moment you sponsor a job. It's the only site that moves as fast as you do.
I mean, I'm seeing the value of a site like this because my recent strategy of just following the rumor mill think they might want to hire me or use my skills, it's a lot more circuitous than just going to Indeed.
73% of online job seekers in the U.S. visit Indeed each month, okay? They can get you the quality hire you need. That's why more than 3 billion businesses worldwide use it for hiring. And you can be business number 3,000,001, Peter Gallagher's new company, looking for cast members of Mr. Deeds LLC or whatever it's going to be called.
Look, I'm raising the pussy willows to the ceiling because I am shocked by these stats you're throwing
They're
out.
big
They are
stats.
impressive.
They're big stats. Now, right now, here's some more
My
stats.
eyebrows are tickling.
They are. They're on the ceiling. All right. Right now, Indeed is offering our listeners a free $75 credit to boost your job post, which means more quality candidates will see it fast. You can try Indeed out with a free $75 credit at Indeed.com/check. This is their best offer available anywhere. So go right now to Indeed.com/check. This offer is valid through December 31st. Terms and conditions apply. So there you go.
And if you are someone listening to this ad who is thinking to yourself, I would love to hire someone Indeed for any type of job, please take advantage of this offer. I will keep my eyes peeled like a hawk.
Yes. Thank you, Peter. And please stop by again. I really do love you.
I don't think I will. I feel pretty embarrassed by this whole encounter.
One thing I wanted to say, Starlee,
Mm-hmm.
your missing this kind of movie. I have been recently watching Morgan Freeman movies,
Mhm.
like movies that Morgan Freeman starred in, like
Along Came a
I watched
Spider,
Seven.
Along
Kiss
Came
the
a Spider.
Girls and
Exactly.
Seven,
Yeah.
Like Kiss the Girls. Like
Yeah.
where I watched Seven,
Yeah.
and I sort of had it had been a while since I'd seen Seven, and I forgot Morgan Freeman is the star of Seven and is so good in Seven. And post that, not that he wasn't already famous with Shawshank and Driving Miss Daisy and stuff, but like post that, it was like Hollywood churned out a Morgan Freeman movie a year,
Mhm.
where he's a cop. And those movies, even though they're often like, the Alex Cross movies are pretty salacious, like they're very relaxing. He's a very relaxing screen presence.
There is nothing more relaxing than those movies. Those and the court, the 90s, 80s legal dramas.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love like a Grisham, right? Yeah, like some kind of legal drama.
Even before the Grisham, I'm talking the the Black Widow ones. Like there's like a woman who killed her husband and they have to get, which is a different genre than Grisham movies, although The Firm is just incredible.
The Firm is the best Grisham movie by far. But do you also mean like Reversal of Fortune? Like, like that sort of like that trend of early 90s, like sort of slightly classy courtroom movies, like with like a good lawyer character, like some twists and turns, that kind of stuff.
I mean, I will take all of them. I want them all back.
Right.
It is a loss that I mourn daily. The gatekeepers are the wrong people and they messed everything up. I want it all back. But I'm saying the whole difference is that the lowbrow ones used to be better than any movie, definitely better than these Netflix movies that are made. And for the most part, if you find one of those Morgan Freeman, they're not all, there's some that are so not good that if you dig around on Netflix, those are the ones that are usually available now because they must be the cheapest ones. But those Morgan Freeman Along Came the Spider ones are so compelling and good.
I feel like the thing we're really mourning the loss of is trashy movies
Airport
for
thriller.
adults. No,
Right.
but you know what I'm
Airport
saying?
thriller
It's
movies.
like
Yes, yeah.
movies made for adults now are always sort of aspiring to be prestige-y, and then commercial films are made for sort of like younger audiences. And the idea of like a sort of like, this is no delusions of being an Oscar movie. This is not trying to be a critic's favorite. This is a popcorn movie for grown-ups starring two people over the age of 50 trying to solve a moral quandary.
And I think what I'm mourning is us feeling like there was more to make. Like it didn't feel like we were going to stop there. The reason these movies felt good is because we had a bunch of them, but I didn't think we were never going to create new genres and
I have a couple other thoughts that I need to say before I forget them. One, Griff, I've never seen High Crimes. I'm assuming you've never seen High Crimes.
I've never seen no one's seen High Crimes.
It was directed by Carl Franklin. Like, is there a chance there's something there? Because he's a good director.
Fuck, Carl Franklin
Maybe
rules.
I should check out. Exactly.
Yeah.
Two,
Morgan Freeman, Jim Caviezel, Ashley Judd. Is that it?
It's a reunion of Judd and Freeman from Kiss the Girls.
Yeah.
Even though they're playing different characters. The other thing Starlee, you mentioned Jennifer Lopez, and it's underrated as well that was such a cornerstone of her movie star career was R-rated movies for grown-ups like The Cell, Angel Eyes, Enough, like those kinds of like movies for grown-ups. Like, I mean, she would make rom-coms and stuff as well, but like she went right to those as she got famous, like pre her becoming like a super duper pop star. That's when I feel like, but even, like a few years ago, she made The Boy Next Door. I mean, that is a silly movie, I guess.
That's the thing. Her movies get trashier. She's right. She's still making them, but they now have to like try to.
They have to be so
16-year-olds. Right.
So what is the logic? They're thinking that grown-ups don't want movies anymore, or they are not going to leave their house, and what do they think that people don't? What happened? Why did we once appeal to grown-ups and not anymore?
I don't know. I think there's partly, I will say, whenever I write about this stuff, so many grown-ups like get in my mentions being like, well, the movie theater experience has been ruined.
I was going to say,
like, I don't like, it's essentially I don't like these kids with their phones looking at, eating popcorn and yelling or whatever. Like there's definitely that energy out there of like, well, no one wants to go to the theater anymore.
That's crazy.
But
they're giving up.
They shouldn't give up.
Yeah.
They also have like a big TV now, maybe.
That's what I was
going to
say. Leapfrogging off of your what you're saying, David. This is 2000. Pretty much right after this, the big DVD boom happens, where suddenly like large, higher quality TVs become much more affordable. DVD is so much better than VHS. And you start to hear the sentiment of like, well, with my setup, it's almost as good as going to the theater, which very quickly gets coupled with these kids, these movies, it's all trash. I don't want to go out and see it. I feel like that, like sort of like to pinpoint it, I feel like white people over the age of 40 are the first audience to start to be like, is it really worth the hassle of going out to the theater? Which they then also blame on all these movies are made for kids. There's nothing worth even seeing anymore. But then when these movies come out, they don't go out and see them because they go, well, it's easier just wait until it's at Blockbuster, until I can get it in the mail from Netflix, until it's streaming on Netflix. Like that changes sort of.
Well, then why don't they still make at least good movies for them to watch at home? I mean, I think it's crazy they don't want to leave their house and that they're still going to Blockbuster. But why we didn't have to then say because they're sitting at home, they get nothing. Is it just because there was no ticket sales that people needed anymore?
I think that's part of it. I think it's harder to make. I think people get more scared. I mean, that's like at the end of the day, it's the thing of just like people stop having the confidence that the thing will work. So they start trying to cut it with like, what lies beneath. I mean, David, you said like you saw this, you were 14 years old. This was a big movie with teenagers, but it is a movie that is not outwardly trying to appeal to teenagers at all. It is a movie that had an allure to teenagers because it was like, oh, this looks like some spooky adult shit.
It was like, scary. Yeah,
right.
That's pretty much the only allure probably.
This movie could not be more teenager proof it doesn't have the one young person. She's sent away in like the first scene.
But teenagers wanted to see it. There was this weird aspirational effect, which certainly used to happen of like, I want to seem mature that I want to see the grown-up horror movie. And now I feel like you have your horror films that are clearly meant for kids and your big franchises and whatever. But then when you get something like The Intruder, which is a perfect example, as David said, a $7 million Dennis Quaid Screen Gems movie that is very
Neighbor
trashy.
from Hell movie.
Right. On its face, that premise could be made into a movie like this. Even at a lower budget, it has all the trappings of it's adult characters, it's adult themes. There's no reason it has to be this sort of like gonzo and flashy and manic, but it just feels like all these movies are like, we need to outwardly try to get 16-year-olds on board. We need to try to get 13-year-olds on board. We need to make it look really active and shocking. And the slow burn of this movie, I mean, talking about like watching it cold without, rewatching the marketing materials, trying to keep myself as blind as I could with just like, I remember the bathtub, I remember the face transformation, nothing else. The most effective chunk of this movie for me is the first hour where I'm going like, where is this going? but it has that confidence because it's got that like Zemeckis control, the control of pace and everything, where you're just like, I know he's going somewhere. I don't know if this movie's going to be a masterpiece, but I know he's building to something. And every little morsel that's dropped off, every clue, I'm really, really engaged trying to figure out what is this movie building to. And as you said, Starlee, it's kind of not until the last 15 minutes that you're like, okay, I get thematically what this movie is doing. But it's rare that you watch a movie that takes so long to reveal not just like its twist, but what it's trying to say, and yet has the confidence to keep you on board for that long.
But what's interesting to me is I was watching the first hour and being like, it's such a shame that it's written so poorly. Because what makes a movie
coming for Clark Gregg.
Oh my God, you have no idea how much I'm gonna I fully want to come for Clark Gregg because it was shocking to me how bad the script was. Considering what the movie what the movie was doing, considering all the jumps scares are at the end of the film, you actually have to build a world. And what makes a movie like Sixth Sense so special is that Sixth Sense conceals its twist by making this incredible film that you're super engrossed in that has scares in it, but you are actually following a plot. Or like a movie like, I mean, I'm going for like really good movie, like Hereditary, where like also saves some scares, very sparing use of when it's scary, but you're so absorbed in the world of it. This movie, I just felt like, because I did think so much care was put into it, I was shocked that this is what I often wonder. Why not put the same amount of care into the script? Why is the script so often an afterthought for a movie like this where they're just talking for an hour?
But then it's weird because this was such a hot script. What were you going to say, Dave?
Well, it was a hot script. Well, I think it's the reason it was a hot script probably is like, it's very easy to, it has an easy hook and not a lot of characters. So it's sort of like clean and spare, right? Like you could just read it and be like, I can picture this in my head. I don't know how else. It's a very rudimentary script.
But wait, this original story came from
Sarah Kernigan, who's like a two-time Academy Award-winning documentary filmmaker. And she has this idea, then she writes it, I believe. She writes a full draft.
It's not that she has this idea. It's supposedly she had a personal experience with the paranormal.
Yes.
Sure. Right.
That is how it is put. So she got, who knows what happens. That sounds cool.
She's married, has been for a long time, to legendary theater director James Lapine.
Yeah.
I don't know how autobiographical the script is or isn't, but she said it was like she was in a house with her husband in a somewhat secluded area, had a paranormal experience. The idea came out of that. I believe she writes a full draft of the script. DreamWorks acquires it. The other thing this movie comes out of is just like, this is peak. DreamWorks is getting up on its feet. They're trying to establish themselves as a studio. Here's like Spielberg and Geffen and Katzenberg, and they want to like make their mark by being like, we're making big fucking marquee movies. We're bringing in the biggest directors, the biggest stars, but they're also just trying to acquire like big shit. Like they're like, I feel like DreamWorks was still trying to position themselves as being more highbrow. Like everything they were trying to make, whether or not it worked, had a certain veneer to it.
Yeah.
Where you're like, even something like Mouse Hunt, which is like, like DreamWorks in its first year is making a kids movie, is this like bizarrely expensive, production heavy, intricate children's movie starring like 2 theater actors.
Yeah.
And so you can see how Spielberg would look at this and be like, oh, it's like an adult couple. It takes place in this house. It's got these Spielberg-y elements. It's got these Hitchcock-y elements. It's got like all these sorts of things in it. And so he, I think, originally is sort of like looking at it for himself, and then he brings the script to Zemeckis. I think the biggest thing was like, it would be great. I mean, so much of the promise of DreamWorks was, man, all Spielberg movies are going to be DreamWorks releases. That's enough to green light a studio, but also he's going to be able to get all his friends and his favors in to do movies. So it's like,
he gets you movie stars.
Right. DreamWorks has gotten a Zemeckis movie now. He's going to be able to call in the movie star favors. And he brings it to Zemeckis and is like, I think this would be good for you. Zemeckis goes, oh man, this is perfect. I need a movie that takes place in a controlled environment while I burn 8 months waiting for Tom Hanks to become emaciated.
I have $100 million just to burn while I'm waiting.
But the thing that happens in between is Spielberg kind of goes like, oh, this script, I like this premise. I don't really like the script. And then hires Clark Gregg and says, like, essentially do a page 1 rewrite. So Kernigan only gets story credit, but Gregg also gets story credit. It was very much positioned as like, she came up with whatever the germ of the thing was. And they essentially bought the script in order to start over from the idea.
But so there's this quote from her on Wikipedia where she talks about, where she says, I think people know that there's no point in calling me in if you want the other kind of women characters, a featureless help me character or the saint or the whore, any of the archetypes. I don't think all women are powerful, intelligent, any of these things. I just require that female characters are very real, that they have all the dimension that the male characters do. I read this after I watched the movie. Like to me, the problem with that first hour is there is no... It's not even that just Michelle Pfeiffer doesn't have a character, because Harrison Ford also doesn't have a character, so it's not just about the woman not having a character.
I was going to say, no one really has dimensionality.
I know.
They're all archetypes.
But it is her movie.
Right.
It is watching a woman question if she's mentally ill, grapple with her marriage, her daughter leaving. Like, the fact that they gave it to... I don't know anything about Clark Gregg other than I know he's an actor. I know he's married to Jennifer Grey. Yeah. This is the first movie he wrote, but like, just being like, this is the guy who should write this story, especially since it was a woman who wrote it to begin with, and she has quotes like that. That is the problem. It just has to be.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it feels like, if nothing else, it's lacking in that sort of specificity, because this movie is so framed from the perspective of this character. All those circumstances you said, being of a certain age, being at a certain point in her marriage, being an empty nester for the first time, like dealing with that fear of like, am I losing my mind?
Right, repressing that she saw her husband have an affair and not acknowledging to herself. Like, she's truly going through, this is Woman Under the Influence as a psychological thriller.
Which is one of my favorite subgenres as a movie, is person questioning whether or not they're going crazy.
Yeah.
Rosemary's Baby, it's very evocative of that.
But these are like all some of my favorite movies ever made.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, Rosemary's Baby is what I kept thinking about, being like, Rosemary's Baby, every scene is enjoyable. Like, it is just the movie you want to watch over and over and over again. And so when you watch a movie like this, I just don't understand why you wouldn't put the same muscle into that part of it, into anything that wasn't just getting the special effects perfect, which they were.
It's wild too that it's like, oh, DreamWorks is gobbling everything up. They're just looking for stuff to acquire. Here's the script. Why they pick Clark Gregg to write it is odd, because he's okay. You have
I don't. I just have to know. I have no beef with Clark Gregg. I think he is
big fan of his.
Actually, a wonderful character actor. I saw Choke, the movie he
directs
directed,
two
which
movies
I thought was decent.
after this, but he has not written or directed a film prior to this.
Very male movie too.
He
like, could not be more male to go from this to Choke.
Yes.
He wrote and directed the movies he directed, but is he, I just have to know, like, is he someone who was like quietly doing rewrites?
Right.
For years, like, which is certainly plausible. Like, how is it that they're like, all right, so we're going to get Zemeckis maybe, or like some big director. Like, how about we give Clark Gregg a call to polish this? Like, I just want to know.
This seems like the scenario, this is what it seems like to me. It seems like Clark Gregg is a super likable guy. He's just exactly the kind of actor that they're like, he's not a movie star, but everyone likes to have him around.
He exudes
kind of a Tate Donovan type, and of the time.
Yeah.
And so they were like, we like Clark. He wants to write.
Must have been great in the room.
Yeah. And we like him. Let's give him this. There's no other scenario. Maybe Joel Grey pulled some strings. I don't know, but it just
okay. No, I Googled because I needed to know more. I needed to know just a little bit more.
Did he write some like spec script that everyone loved?
Yes.
Okay.
He had written some spec scripts that Nina Jacobson, who becomes a really big wig, and is at DreamWorks had loved. And she's like, comes to him and she reads his scripts, I guess, and she's like, we have a ghost idea that's a couple of sentences and Spielberg is sniffing around it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And so basically she sort of sends him off with like that.
Okay.
And then he turns in a draft, and then Zemeckis calls and is like, I want to do this, but like it's like a Hitchcock ghost thing.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, you know, and so very much a for hire job, but I guess like when they start it off, it's kind of it's just a spec thing. It's like,
Yeah.
well, we'll
But
see.
what about
It's,
Sarah?
why don't
But
you
why
take a
wasn't
shot at
Sarah
it?
the one who wrote it then? If she had the story, and she
No, they clearly
and
just bought it from her and were like, goodbye. We we have no.
And at first I was like, maybe she didn't have any credit, so they were easy. It was like they were just like, we just don't take her seriously at all. But she seems respected, so I just don't understand. Had she already won Oscar? It just is so crazy to me.
There's also this weird fucking thing. I mean, speaking about all the stupid behavioral, like sort of shit that doesn't make sense in the entertainment industry. But there's this line of thinking of like, it has to be additive. You have to move forward where like, like
they did their thing. We're bringing someone new. Like not, we're not
Right,
going backwards.
right,
We're not.
right.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I've heard stories about like someone writes a
As have
script. Then they go, "Ooh, it's good. This area we feel like is underdeveloped. We're going to hire someone to rewrite it with an eye on this thing." The person rewrites it. They fuck the script up worse. And then the original writer goes, "I'll rewrite it and try to reset it and take your notes." And they go, "We can't go back to the first writer. We have to hire a third writer to undo the work that the second writer did, rather than just reverting back to the earlier file, you know, and then bringing a new writer onto that." Like, there's just this thought of like, you have to be doing new shit as opposed to ever moving back.
It's because everyone's got to justify their jobs. Everyone's got to
Right, that's why.
justify. Yeah.
Right, and it's partly it's a control thing. It's like, well, no, you were there then. If you come back, then you have more authorship of this than maybe we want. You know what I mean? Like that must be part of it. Like, you know, they're like, fundamentally, it is our project, and you are simply, you know, one of the many tools in our
Clark
toolbox.
Gregg seems perfect for that too. He seems like a guy who'd be willing to be one of the tools in a toolbox.
Yes.
He is not someone in these interviews who's like, I'm so proud of that movie. In these interviews, he's like, you know what? I saw it at the premiere. I've never watched it again because I don't love to like rewatch things I worked on. I would just obsess over what I wanted to change. So it's he does not seem like
he seems,
you know, that was really my moment. You know, he's just kind of like, well, it was a.
But that's
job
what I think
did.
is appealing about him. He really does. He really does seem so likable in a way that
he's very affable.
Yeah.
He's nice.
Yes.
I enjoy
him. That I feel like if you don't want someone who gets in the way of your vision,
sure,
he's the one. She has all these opinions about women and.
Right.
She wants stuff to have archetypes.
I think that's the other big factor, Starlee, is just like, if someone like Sarah Koenig comes in and is like, this is personal. I had this experience. Out of this, I examined my own relationships. They're like, ooh, interesting premise. We don't want you getting too attached to this thing. Like, you care too much about this. And then to go to Clark Gregg and go like, can you spin something off of these 3 lines? And he's like, yeah, sure. Like, I think they get worried if people care too much, because then they're like, oh, are they going to be a precious artist? If someone like Clark Gregg comes in and he's like, it's a living, they're like, great. That's the exact right attitude.
Yeah.
Because we can still exert more control over it in the way that you're saying, David.
But it's a problem when it's a movie that is so about the writing. If you're going to do a movie like this, to pull off that first hour has to really be about characters and story.
Well, that would make this a capital G great movie, possibly. But the movie we watched, the movie that exists, is all
weird.
about the direction and deploying 2 big movie stars, and the writing is an afterthought. And that's why the movie is very watchable and kind of lovable 20 years later, but not capital G great, I would say.
But also why it's so slow, because you're waiting for something to happen instead of getting attached.
There was a Pacino
Right,
interview, I feel like recently, that went a little viral where someone just asked him, like, why do you make so many shitty movies? And he was like, at a certain point, it became like this competitive thing of they would like send me an awful script with a big, like, money offer attached. And I would go, this script is garbage. I wonder if I can act well enough to make this better. Like, if someone sends me an A-level script, I can trust that I'll be good in that. If someone sends me an F level script, the struggle of could I turn this into a C almost gets me more excited. And I have to wonder,
What is he? He's like 0 for 100
Yeah,
on
exactly.
that.
Because then it
Like, it's
truly
like-
dragged him to the bottom of the sea the
Yeah.
way that this movie drags
Truly.
Amber Valletta. That
Right.
decision.
yes, yes. But I think he, even in that interview, is like, I probably got stuck in that trap and it's never really worked. Like, he admits it, like I shouldn't have done like
Right.
18 Avi Lerner cop movies where I'm 87 and pretending I'm
Right.
24 and dyeing my hair orange. But like, I do feel like to a certain degree, someone like Zemeckis, who in all these interviews I've been reading is like a guy who is innately kind of ornery and also really resented the fact that after Back to the Future, he was seen as, oh, he's a sure thing. Bobby knows what he's doing. And he's like, I get off on people questioning me. I want to feel like I'm
Interesting.
pushing against something. And when everyone trusts me, I get really uncomfortable. I wonder if there's a degree of like reading a script like this where you're like, the script's like 60%. The germs are there. And I see this as a good excuse for me to use all my director like toolkit, like sort of like, oh, I can
Yeah.
do a Hitchcock homage, and almost saying like, is it a better test of me as a director to try to make a great movie out of a script that's mezzo than taking a script that's a slam dunk that almost is kind of on rails and hard to fuck up?
He needs something to slot in between
Right.
castaway things, and he wants to make a Hitchcock movie, so he may also just be he's like, what thrillers
Good enough.
do you
Good
have?
fit.
Like,
I don't think I disagree
Sorry.
with the good fit though. That's what I don't think he was doing. I think his weakness is women characters. His films, Leah Thompson is so good in Back to the Future, but that's because of Leah Thompson. And that character is such a weird plot. And it's so interesting that that's her character. But across the board, I like in Castaway, the woman, the angel that comes in at the end, that like he
Sure.
just has, it's not his strong suit. So I think he wasn't able to recognize that in the script. And there's also like when I was first watching it before, I didn't read about it. I didn't remember anything about this movie. I didn't read any of this stuff until after. I didn't read about the Hitchcockian part. And then I began to realize it as I was watching it, obviously. But I don't think it's because it's shot like a Hitchcock movie. I don't think it's just like the Hitchcock references. I think even the style of the marriage feels like a
Yes.
Hitchcock movie. And so when I first,
Yes.
so one of those first scenes when she's in bed with Harrison Ford and they're about to have sex, the way they kiss is so weird. And as I began to realize how Hitchcockian the movie was, I was like, maybe it was intentional. Literally the way he had them kiss, where it's like their mouths are kind of like mushed up against each other. And they're about to have sex, but it feels so old fashioned. And at first I took it as Robert Zemeckis not knowing how to make a sexy scene, but I actually think he might have been doing it intentionally as a throwback.
A little bit. Also, like Harrison Ford just doesn't have sex on screen much. Like there's something unsettling about Harrison Ford in this movie right away. Like, because I'm just like, he's just like a guy with a job in the house, like, and he's normal. Cause like in that scene you're talking about, Starlee, he's shirtless. He looks sensational. Like he looks like just like the greatest kind of like hot dad. And he's like typing on his laptop or whatever.
This is the very end of his like classical hotness period, right? Like after this, it's
Right.
like the fucking K-19 and Hollywood Homicide. He's got the earring. Everyone's like, is he our weird grandpa who's like now moved to Malibu and is trying to
Right.
like rebrand
Yeah.
himself?
But
Yeah.
he does know how to
Right,
be
right,
like
totally.
that scene is so weird. And the way when she says, do you want to fool around? And he makes this smile that is so creepy and weird and not creepy to gesture at what's going to come at the end of the movie. Just like you look at him and you're like, this man has never had sex appeal, which makes your brain short circuit because it's Harrison Ford and he had nothing but he's had so much sex appeal before that. And even if you haven't seen him have sex, he
Yes.
is the most charming. In Working Girl,
Yes.
Working Girl is
yeah,
number one.
because we
I would say.
even
Like,
setting aside Han Solo and Indiana Jones, in a rom-com, he knows what to do.
oh, sure.
And so suddenly it's all
totally.
gone. And so I think it's a combination of Harrison Ford getting to that point that you're talking about, Griffin, where he suddenly like loses it all, but also maybe a filmmaking choice.
That's the other weird thing about this movie, though, is like, as you said, Starlee, you read the reviews and everyone is slamming of like, Zemeckis has done this 1,000 times. He knows he can do it. It feels like his heart's not in it. And I'm like, this movie is about directing above all else. Like, this feels like a movie where Zemeckis is trying to will this into being a classic through sheer directing, you know?
Yeah.
Whether or not he succeeds, it doesn't feel dispassionate to me.
Yeah.
There might be calculations in it and like, oh, it'd be fun to do this type of movie. Oh, this feels like the right kind of movie to make in the time I have while Tom Hanks, stops eating fries. Like all this shit. Like there are weird sort of asterisks to it. But all of that stuff, and even just like, I want to see if I can reframe the star personas of two big Hollywood stars.
Yeah.
Like all this sort of shit. And even just that sort of challenge of like, oh, you never really see Ford play a villain. And also, weirdly, for a guy who is such a sort of like towering figure of like modern Hollywood hunkdom, you realize watching it, oh, Harrison Ford is weirdly kind of asexual in a lot of movies.
Yeah.
Like he is known as such a classical hunk, but it's almost always through suggestion, you know?
Yeah.
And you think about
Usually, like Witness.
Yeah.
I mean, he's so hot in these movies, like
Right.
no question.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying. And Working Girl has the at least seared in my memory shirt change scene. That is, he is very cute in Working Girl, but it is usually archetypal. Like it's usually not like getting
and it
too
feels
R-rated,
like he's kind
if
of
that
like
makes
Haze
sense.
Cody in a certain way, where you're realizing like there is this oddly old-fashioned thing about him where you feel like when he kisses Michelle Pfeiffer, it's like when you watch certain films where kissing was thought too scandalous in like, the early to mid 1900s, where when the two movie stars have the romantic kiss, they're just like smushing their faces together. Their lips are tightly closed. Like he does have.
Come here. You have to say come here.
The way that they kiss, and then you might as well. It's like in old movies where they just like slide to the next scene. It feels like you are
cut
not
to the train.
Yeah, you're you're not allowed to see what happens next. It's so odd, and I think it's a combination of these particular actors and Robert Zemeckis and all of them actually being weirdly old-fashioned. And also I think Robert Zemeckis possibly did not know what a good version of this kind of movie is. I think he also might have, because he had not made this kind of movie, he might have been shown the movies that we've all watched. It's kind of sometimes I have friends who didn't grow up on TV and then they'll watch a bad TV show and think that's like a great thing because they've never seen anything like that. Like he also could have seen the bad psychological thrillers and been like, this is what I'm actually supposed to be striving for.
Well, like, we sort of been talking about this, but I feel like watching all of his films in order as we have, you forget, like, right, he was, like, really a comedy director with a capital C. That's what he was. His student films were comedies. Spielberg hired him when he said, I finally want to do a comedy to write 1941. His first, like, 6 or 7 movies are all comedies first and foremost. If they're genre mashups, the second thing is it comes after comedy.
Yeah, honestly, Forrest Gump is a drama, but it is obviously has many comic elements and
it's
is
the
sort
pivot
of
point.
unclassifiable.
Yes.
Contact is the first movie he made that is a
I won an
D
Oscar.
drama. And
I'm a
it's
serious
genre
adult
movie.
filmmaker now. That's right before this.
97.
Forrest Gump wins the Oscar. And then it's like Contact, totally earnest, totally serious, no comedy. What Lies Beneath,
and
Castaway,
Contact, not a flop, but I do think was a little dinged at the time, and he maybe was wounded by that because it's a good movie. So maybe he's like, okay, well, I guess I need to make like pulpy stuff.
Audience,
What Lies Beneath and Castaway are two crowd pleasing movies. Exactly. Like they are movies that can appeal to grown-ups, they are not like completely hacky, but like he definitely is like, I'll make thrillers, like I'll make like, I'll edge of your seat stuff.
Castaway to me is such an exploration of manhood in a great way. Like I Have Made Fire is the epitome of like men's secret, like their most burning desire. But actually, because he made Contact right before this, Contact is what I forgot when I said that he doesn't know women characters. I haven't seen Contact in a long time.
Yeah.
But that is very much, I remember loving
good.
Contact. So I actually have to amend what I said so maybe Contact and Castaway are the ones that are supposed to go together. And then there's this weird film in between.
But Starlee, I mean, you're making an interesting point, which is like that first hour of this movie through a certain prism is kind of the counterpoint to Castaway, where it's like, this is a movie about a woman of the same age left alone with her thoughts.
Yes.
To a degree, it's a woman in seclusion, And it's not like Castaway is the physical version of this. He's stranded. But what lies beneath is like, well, now the daughter's out of the house and he's really obsessed with his work and they've moved to this little fixer-upper. Like, how does she function if she's left alone in a house for this long?
And what does she most want?
people?
What is her version of I Have Made Fire? Like when she's wandering around, like they keep just being like, you have your house and you have your garden. You must be so busy. And it's so clear. Like they cannot stop mentioning that garden and house, the garden which never plays into it at all. Like her entire character is based on this move and this garden that she's supposed to be tending to that never gets tended to. And so he doesn't seem, him or Clark Gregg, they don't seem interested in exploring or even asking the question of what she most wants. We just know what she's afraid of losing.
It's annoying because it feels like the movie is so close in so many ways. It's like if you lay out all the elements, it's like this should be great. And while watching it, I had that excitement of like, there are few things that get me more jazzed than watching a movie take its time, but laying out all the pieces. Where it's like, this movie has the confidence to just keep me there, even though I'm confused, even though I don't really know what it's trying to say, because it keeps on deliberately laying all these breadcrumbs. And I'm going to trust that they're going to fucking make like, a proper dish out of it at the end of the day. I guess in the last like 20 minutes, I understand thematically what the main thrust of the movie is.
Yeah.
Almost all lines up thematically, but there's a lot of stuff that's either done sort of like sloppily or things that are sort of abandoned, and it feels like it should all they have everything they should need to make it a full letter grade better than it is.
For sure. The problem is every single thing is only about leading to the end, and you can't actually do that. You actually have to have things add up. It can't be a straight line. Adding up is not the same as a path that you're just on, that you're kind of you get the tram gets set in motion. And so everything that they discuss is about this one thing.
David.
Yeah, Griff.
I hate to put you on blast, especially on Maine like this with the whole world listening.
I'm ready.
But I gotta ask.
Do
you really know what's in your multivitamin?
Oh, God, I can't believe you
really
like this. All right, my hands are up. I'll admit it. I take the pill. I know David, it's good for me. I don't know what's in it.
David! Sugars, GMOs, synthetic fillers, artificial colorants, not to mention animal byproducts like sheep's wool and gelatin from hooves and hides. They're all ingredients that you might find in your basic multivitamin.
You're saying it like an English person, which is really fun.
How would you know that? But Ritual, David, it isn't your typical multivitamin.
Right, exactly. That's a totally different horse.
It's clean. It's vegan friendly. Woody Harrelson would take it. It's made with key nutrients.
Yeah. Informs your bodies can actually use. Yeah, no, I understand. That's why I switched to Ritual.
No shady extras. You're not going to see someone in the background of a shot running a gambling circuit.
Exactly. No.
Because that would be a shady extra.
No, this is very, very simple stuff. I've tried a bunch of multivitamins over the years that come to your house. Ritual has been really great for both my wife and I. They're humble brag. formulated with key nutrients. They got vitamin D3, so they help fill gaps in your diet. They're designed
Probably
to
my favorite
dissolve
vitamin.
later in the less sensitive area of the stomach. They got a delayed release, so you can take them without food, because sometimes those vitamins really mess with my stomach.
No, I got a hella sensitive stomach. One of the most sensitive in the West.
You can get versions for women, for men, for teens. They're designed and developed to support different life stages. And they've got a one-of-a-kind visible supply chain, so you know where all the nutrients are coming from.
Yeah, look, David, it boils down to this, okay? You deserve to know what's in your multivitamin, okay?
Fair.
They're going to be delivered to your door every month with free shipping. You can start, snooze, or cancel your subscription anytime. And if you don't love Ritual within your first month, they'll refund your first order.
Yep.
And that's why Ritual is offering our listeners 10% off during your first 3 months.
Yep.
So all you got to do, you got to visit ritual.com/blank check. Type out the full podcast name.
Blank check.
To start your ritual today. Blank check.
That's it.
That's ritual.com/blank check.
10% off. It's great.
And get those vitamins.
I read the Ebert review, and he said, like, much has been made of this being Zemeckis' Hitchcock homage, but I think Zemeckis made one fatal mistake, which is having the film go into the supernatural, which is a thing that Hitchcock wouldn't do. And I keep going back and forth on that, where, like, to some degree, I like that the movie crosses that threshold.
I think
I think that's
100%.
good.
I saw that. I read that too. I disagree so strongly. I think the strongest part of the premise, the idea that he was using effects the way that he thought Hitchcock would, and it actually had such restraint to them because of that, and there was so much care put into them. The problem is the writing. The problem is that the movie does not get constructed.
Sure,
He's just wrong. Like that premise is the best thing about the movie.
But also, it's a structural issue. I mean, it's like if you just lay out what the main thrust of this movie is, right? It's like, okay, woman, empty nester, only child, leaves the house, husband, workaholic, somewhat emotionally distant. Now in a smaller house in a smaller town, more left alone, becomes obsessed with her next door neighbors, who seem to be fighting. And when the wife disappears, who she's never actually met, becomes convinced that she's been killed by the husband and she's trying to solve it. So you're like,
yeah, the first half is Rear Window.
Right. The first half is Rear Window. And then it just makes this very sort of dramatic shift of well, there's the James Remar, the scene where she confronts Remar and is like, "You killed your wife. I know you did it." The whole first half of the movie it's the voyeuristic thing. It's the what's happening on the other side. Is the grass greener or less green with our next door neighbors?
Right.
They seem to be more passionate, but also maybe something dark's happening there. What's going on? Then it feels like it's heading into the is she crazy or is it real kind of like that sort of thriller, which is my favorite sort of type of thriller. And then there's the Miranda Otto scene where I thought, oh, is the movie about here's the wife, but is it really the wife, or is he presenting a new person to be his wife? I was like, is it one of those movies where there's a cover up and everyone's trying to convince her that she's making something up in her mind, but actually it's just a very elaborate cover up? And then no, it's like the Miranda Otto scene just kind of completely closes the book on it. And then Michelle Pfeiffer goes, oh no, everything I was paranoid about, there was this shit going on with my next door neighbors, but that was actually just a kind of weird relationship that I let my paranoia misinterpret. But then the other stuff on top of that I viewed as supernatural was real, but had nothing to do with her because she's not dead. There's this unrelated missing woman case that I had forgotten about, and that must be the ghost. And now I'm trying to solve the different mystery of what does that woman have to do with my husband. When you put it like that, it's just that's two totally different movies.
And they're thinly linked by the fact that she's sort of been seeing spooky stuff the entire movie. But that's about it. I could see more being layered in where it's well, no one believes her when it's real because
it's a Boy Who Cried Wolf thing.
When it wasn't real. But they don't really do much of that because once the first half is over, like you said, we're really just in sort of cat and mouse, Harrison Ford, Michelle Pfeiffer stuff.
That's the other thing.
there's not much time before it's
The
time
first
for
hour
their
of the
showdown,
movie.
like, which is just a different movie.
Yeah, and it doesn't make any sense too, because like the way that the way he acts actually has no logical
creepy.
explanation. Yeah, he's
Yes.
like threatening her. He's not answering questions.
Right, he seems like a bad husband. Right, yeah. I mean, there definitely is
Yeah,
drama.
and the
at
way
that
she
end
acts
of
with the fence is so
picket
crazy. I did
fence,
like the
yes.
scene
Yeah.
when the neighbor talked about why she
Talking
left. I
through
actually
the
thought
fence.
no. Later on, when she explained, when they had to come up with an
Oh, sure.
explanation
Oh,
to tie a
right.
bow on this plot line that we're never going to hear from again.
Right.
When she says, "If you ever loved someone so much that you like that," she fled because she loved him too much, and they were too passionately entwined.
Yeah.
There's some pathos to that. It doesn't get explored in the movie. I mean, there's all sorts of things like that in this movie that I wish they had actually understood. It's almost like they wrote the script without understanding what the gems were, so they had no way to actually tie it together and follow it thoroughly.
But then the other weird thing is I read that Sorkin wanted Clark Gregg to play one of the roles on Sports Night, and he had to turn it down because they were like, this movie is going and we need you on set for rewrites. Like, this
Yeah.
very much seems like a thing where he was like the writer. He was
Yes.
there every single day. He was the only guy with his hands on this script.
I mean, certainly he is the only credit screener, but like, that also feels like $100 million Robert Zemeckis shit, where he's like, no, the writer will be here every day in case I need
Sure.
him. Right. You know what
Sure.
I mean? Like, or he's just like, no, there will be no corners cut. I am Robert Zemeckis.
But yes. But also, it doesn't seem like there were other people taking passes at this.
No,
We don't hear about David
whatever.
Cap,
He's
right.
in
Right.
charge of it.
And
Right,
also
yeah.
the fact that there was multiple drafts, then there was actually revisions on the script, and this was the final version they came up with, blows my mind.
Right. Like, you mentioned Hereditary, Starlee, and like a thing that Ari Aster does really well is I feel like the movie starts out and I'm like, okay, they're loading the plate up. Like, this is the first round at the buffet and he's putting so much on the plate. Are his eyes bigger than his stomach? Is there any way he's going to be able to tie all these things together cohesively? Have these things pay off, you know?
Mhm.
Which
I think he
feel like
does. Yeah.
I think he's good at that. I think that's one of the things that makes his movies exciting to watch, because they have these epic run times and they seem kind of oblique at the beginning, and you're trying to figure out where are all these elements going to converge. And I get excited watching a movie like What Lies Beneath, where you're like, okay, so the Remar stuff is a red herring, but it has to have some greater purpose, right? Whether it's a greater
Yeah.
emotional payoff or it
Yeah.
ties into thematically what the movie is doing. And it's like, the second that's abandoned, I almost start getting more excited because I'm like, fuck, okay, wait a second. Like, Bobby's writing a huge check for himself. He's not going to put onion rings on the plate if he's not going to eat them. Like, what's going on here? And it's like, at the end, you're like, I guess he's trying to do this sort of like wishy-washy, like, look at marriages where it's like, well, what is it like? Pfeiffer has this marriage that's sort of like, it's not just appearances, but it's a little lacking in passion. And is there
Yeah.
envy over them? But then her husband, who seems kind of banal, is actually hiding this sort of like aggro energy, but it's
Yeah.
all about her wishing that he lusted after her more, and he kind of views her only as like, this is the perfect kind of life that I want.
I mean, it's very
You know?
tricky too, because like it's very complicated why she's with like the throwing in of her giving up her cellist career to be with him
Yes.
after her
Yes.
husband dies. Like, that is unnecessary complications because it's not actually explored. And every time they say it, when they're like having their big heated fight, and he was like, "You were a single mother. You love like It's not a
Right.
given that she ever. Why did she have to give up a career? Why did it all have to stop because she married this
I
scientist?
feel like, yes, none of that is particularly well explored, but it's all
Yeah.
part of whatever the quote unquote What Lies Beneath, where it's like, oh, you know, you think they're such a great couple and they've got a
Right.
nice house and everything seems so perfect, but actually there's all this drama. And then below that also, he killed someone and her ghost haunts them. But like that's
Yeah.
layer 2. First there's layer 1.
Right. This is also the other area in which, like, the interesting ways he's working with movie star personas and our relationships to movie stars actually almost works against the movie, is that, like, you're watching for the first hour and you're like,
okay, come on. Harrison Ford is first build. This is the most relaxed performance I've ever seen. He's not going to be in this movie just to quietly say, look, this is a really big project.
Right.
So you're like, you're
scaring
end
me.
up, right. He's gonna have skin in the game. Like you're like, he's so underplaying it. He's not tipping his hand to the fact that he's gonna turn out to be bad at all. That you know he has to turn out to be bad because otherwise you wouldn't pay Harrison Ford $20 million to be in this movie. He wouldn't agree to do it if there wasn't more for him to play. So it's like there's that weird subversion of just like it is bizarre how low-key he is. It is bizarre how quiet he is because they're also not trying to, it doesn't feel like they're positioning it as like, oh, they're the perfect couple. Look at how much chemistry they have. Look at how red hot they are. It's like they're nice. They're like a nice couple. It doesn't feel aspirational.
You'd have dinner
You're
with
like,
them.
I guess that's a decent
Maybe
marriage.
their dinners seemed kind of boring. I mean, they were a boring couple, and that's the shocking part. Is it's Michelle Pfeiffer and Harrison Ford, and the feelings I was having watching these two. I actually always was drawn to. I did like watching her.
So good.
She's so good. But Harrison Ford, I've never experienced watching Harrison Ford at this stage where where I wanted to see less of him. Like I felt slightly repelled by him, and it wasn't because he turned out to be a sociopathic killer. I loved him as a killer. That was the best scenes with him. There was something very, very weird. I really deeply did not envy her being married to him, which is a shocking feeling to have when watching someone being married to Harrison Ford in a movie.
But I wonder if that's almost what he was trying to play, of like there's an insincerity to the way this guy is playing the role of the perfect husband. I mean, that another element that's like just sort of weirdly thrown into the mix of this movie is like the specter, the ghost, if you will, of his father. The idea that his father was this towering figure and he feels completely crushed by the legacy of his father and needing to be like as important a man, have as beautiful a wife, as great a family, like all this sort of stuff, that it's like the ideal husband, Harrison Ford of the first hour, is a guy who kind of can't even give a shit about going through the motions. You know, he's doing the bare minimum to play the role of the ideal husband. Because it's odd. Like after this, Harrison Ford enters weird grandpa stage, but also is like, sometimes it just feels like he doesn't give a shit. Like he's just so lazy, he's asleep, he doesn't care anymore. And sometimes he's locked in still. And this is an era where it still feels like he would care, but you're watching it and you're like, he's doing so fucking little, but it doesn't feel like it's out of laziness. There has to be some thought process.
It's a choice.
Right.
Well, some of it seems like it had to be. I think in his mind, he was like, I'm contrasting this which is with the guy that you see at the end of this movie. But he doesn't. He somehow doesn't contrast it with charm. He contrasted it with dullness. He's like, if I can be so dull, you won't see it coming that I'm the bad guy. And then there's a part that I think he wasn't conscious of, that if you actually did kill someone, you have to bury that so deep inside yourself that it actually would dull you in a way that you would act the way he acts. Yeah. And I don't think I don't know if he's aware of that.
I know I might buy that as a conscious thing. I don't know. I mean, I do think everything we're talking about, though, it just feels like they stripped one too many layers out of this, like to make it a spare and clean thriller. Like, and again, I enjoy this movie. Like, I have no.
I do too. Yeah,
movie. Like, it's very watchable, but like, it's just that there's like one thing missing.
Like an episode of three people who like a movie trying to figure out why it isn't a masterpiece. You know, like
right?
Well, yeah, but it's because it's so clean, the palette that's being presented to me. I can see where it could have been improved upon.
Totally.
There's so much time to understand what could be better about it while still enjoying it the entire time. It feels a lot like Her in the Tub, where we're watching it. We can't do anything about it. We can't change anything. It's
Her in the Tub, which is the best set piece in the film, obviously.
It's just kind of incredible. Yeah.
Is that something that just feels like something like an idea a director has? Like, I have no idea if Clark Gregg was the one who came up with it, but like, I want to stage a set piece that's so tiny and yet can totally occupy an audience for 10 whole minutes. Like they can literally play out like an action scene, even though it's just a person in a tub, like trying to twitch her toes. Like it feels like a challenge a director sets himself, where he's like, how much can I strip out?
I remember. For an hour.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would lose my mind. I remember seeing Sorcerer, the
Sure.
Friedkin movie, and having this like breakthrough in how I thought about like tension in filmmaking, where it was one of the multitude of close-ups of just wet dynamite on the back of a truck, right? And I was just like, this is the most nerve-wracking shot I have ever seen in a film. And then I stepped back and went like, this is like, it could have been a second unit shot. Like this shot
Right.
in and of itself holds no power, but it is the build that this movie, the sort of like relationship and the understanding and the game that the audience has bought into of just now anytime he cuts to an inanimate object, it feels like a shot of like Jason with a machete. There's so much tension in an image which in and of itself has no power. And that kind of like directorial flex is like the bathtub scene in like a nutshell, where it's like, well, part of the gimmick is the actress can't even express the terror. Like the history of horror
It's
and
all
thrillers
eyes,
is so
right.
much, right? But it's like the history of actresses being asked to play terror, right? You know, this whole other thing we can get into, and like the obsession with like true crime and women being terrified of being murdered and what that feeds into in our culture, you know?
Yeah.
And like the narrative of the women surviving it and being able to sort of overpower it, whatever it is. But all conveyed through like the woman playing hyperventilating and the
And
freaked
screaming.
out eyes and the running. Right, all that sort of stuff. The Scream
Yeah.
Queens thing, and it's like, this is the opposite. It's like, here's a shot of someone almost unnaturally still. And Kuleshov effect style, we are projecting everything onto it. And a shot that looks like it could be out of a Nancy Meyers movie of just someone being like, I need a bath, something fierce, you know? Becomes like terrifying.
It's that Hitchcock thing of he gets the shower is scary because you feel vulnerable in it. You know, like
Yeah.
it's an obvious connection. It's an obvious diagnosis, but like it's still just great. Like we are afraid of these mundane things because we are vulnerable when we're sleeping or when we're bathing or when we're like you know, alone. Like it's just the easiest fear to prey on, but it works. It's clever.
And even like being buried alive and like not being able to do anything. If someone like that, the being paralyzed is a fear that is primal to us as well. I loved how at the end, after the bathtub scene, after the bridge, when the truck goes into the water and you see the water come in to the car, the way she plays it, she's so upset. You'd be upset no matter what if you were in a car sinking to the bottom of the ocean. But because she just survived it in the bathtub, she's just like, fuck, again. Like she doesn't even get any time to enjoy not being drowned. And there's actual, you can actually see her trauma that she experienced 10 minutes before from surviving this exact fate.
Such a good actor. Like she's so fucking good.
Yeah.
And it's somewhat rare that someone is this good of an actor and this good of a movie star. Like I feel like other people have said like Michelle Pfeiffer is like a character actor who tricked people into thinking she was a movie star because she was so beautiful. But there is that thing where you never feel that protectiveness with her of like, this is what the Michelle Pfeiffer movie star persona is, versus someone like Harrison Ford where you're like, they're playing on my relationship to him. Michelle Pfeiffer, you watch any Michelle Pfeiffer movie and there's kind of a clean slate, you know?
That's
You're
actually,
like, I want to see what she's doing here because I'm not preset into thinking she has to be playing this type of character. Sometimes she's very high status people. Sometimes she's like a seductress. Sometimes she's a flibberty gibbet, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes she's cold. Sometimes she's funny. Like,
is there, I've never thought about that with her. You're totally right. It's like meeting her for the first time every time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even though, she's not exactly like you would never walk into a room and be like, I'm picturing like a Michelle Pfeiffer type for this.
Yeah.
Even though she's obviously, like she has a look, like an undeniable look. It's not like she looks really different in her movies.
No, she's not anonymous. She doesn't disguise herself. She doesn't transform herself in a showy way. You know, but she almost always looks and sounds like Michelle Pfeiffer. But
here's the thing that's because now I'm really thinking about this. It's not like Harrison Ford stopped being a movie star after this. It is unfortunately kind of like Michelle Pfeiffer stopped being a movie star after this. Like, she shifts into more supporting roles, like and stuff like that after
This is the end of A-list Michelle Pfeiffer.
Yeah,
She does,
I
like,
am Sam.
White
the
Oleander,
next
I am
year,
Sam.
Right, is the one that kills it. I mean, White Oleander,
she
that's
ages
a supporting
out,
role.
plus becomes
Yeah.
like a really rich wife. In real,
That's
her
also
real
true.
life
She's-
thing
Right.
happens, and she ages.
Got that Boston legal money, but like,
Yeah.
but Harrison Ford too, of course, he still will give you an Indiana Jones, but also is basically about to shift into supporting actor mode.
You see the shift in that smile that he gives her in bed. I'm telling you, that's when
That's
when you
it.
see the tea leaves of what the future holds in store for Harrison Ford.
It's just weird that this unambiguous hit is basically the last chapter
know.
in both of their A-list movie star careers. It's not like they made this and then it's like, well, I guess it's time to call it quits on them. They made this. They should make 5 more movies like this.
That's like the Adrian Brody post-pianist path. I feel like that does happen.
But that moment, Starlee, that smile is like, that's it. There's the last glimpse of Harrison Ford's virility as a leading man, right?
Well, you see, I mean, the smile, what it actually is, so it's like when you see Amber Valletta's face on Michelle Pfeiffer's face. He's in bed. He looks like Harrison Ford. He's got that chest. He is so handsome. Then they kiss, and he does this smile. The smile, do you remember it? He like kind of puffs up his cheek and is like,
yeah.
It's like, it's so disturbing. And when he does that face is when he turns into the equivalent of Amber Valletta, and he turns into a different movie star from that point on.
But he's just like, I mean, the right after this is Hollywood Homicide. Does he? Or no, K-19.
No, that's because right after this, and it's not even. 2 years later is K-19, which he gets, of course, paid a ton of money for, as we've discussed.
Bombs really hard.
Right. And then it's Hollywood's Homicide, and then a 3-year break until Firewall. And that was really the last time, apart from an Indiana Jones, where he's the lead.
He gets his massive paycheck for Indiana Jones, and then he becomes more, as you said, David, of like a supporting actor. Like it's like Morning Glory, Extraordinary Measures.
In those movies,
two-hander.
He's a co-lead, right? Exactly.
42.
In those Cowboys and Aliens, 42. Like those, like the most you're going to get out of him is co-lead. I don't think he's bad in every single movie post this. And as we've talked about, like he's very locked in when he needs to be, like Force Awakens, obviously. But he's given up on what I mean. And
it is interesting that it came after a hit, though. You're right.
He sort of becomes Spencer Tracy post Firewall, right? Like he's like, now I'm a grump. Now I'm sort of the elder statesman.
I
now
have
I'll
glasses.
sort of gruff character types.
Yeah,
right.
I'm wearing suspenders or something, maybe. Like, he had a couple bombs before this movie. Like, Random Hearts and 6 Days, 7 Nights are both disappointments.
I mean, Random Hearts, full out bomb. 6 Days, 7 Nights, okay, but as you said, underperformed.
Disappointment, right? But still,
What I found remarkable about this movie, though, was his inability to access the charm. Except at the end, when he's clearly there's something that's energizing him about playing a villain. But I would have thought that if you're a charming man, that's the one thing you could always tap into.
But that's the question. Is that a choice, or is this him?
It might be a choice.
The charm.
Because it seems like he's like, I really want to play a total bad guy and have it be a surprise.
Except after he loses the charm. But then it sounds like he doesn't ever get the charm back in any of the movies again.
Exactly. And it's here's what I would contend. I would contend any movie in which he's successfully charming after this is based on the opposite of this algorithm, which is Harrison Ford acts like an inaccessible grump and asshole to a comedic effect for the first 75% of the runtime.
Right.
So the moment where he shows that he cares is kind of heartwarming. Like, he has to flip it. You don't enter the movie with the innate, well, Harrison Ford, we all love this guy. Like, I think he's great in Morning Glory. I think he's very good in Force Awakens. I think those are two of the times he's really turned on and giving a shit. But both of those, it's like, oh, come on, I hate this. Everything sucks.
Yes,
everything's awful.
definitely.
Get away from me, you kids. And then when he shows he cares, you're like, fuck yeah, Harrison Ford's still in there. But he never again does what you're saying, Starlee, which is like, oh, you start the movie being like, well, Harrison Ford, of course. I would fuck him right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
He can never age out of that for me. But in this one, it's before you see it before your very eyes.
Yeah.
The transformation happens, and then we've lost him forever. And I don't feel good about it.
Right.
It does. It's hard watching something like that. It's hard watching a movie star lose something that you always depended on them for.
And then like Pfeiffer, I remember, I feel like it was on Weekend Update. Someone did a bit. It was like a Weekend Update, like someone doing a fucking op-ed monologue, Pete Davidson type piece, as we would say now. It was maybe even like David Spade doing a Hollywood Minute or some shit.
Sure.
But it was someone joking about how many TV shows David E. Kelly had on air at the same time. And I remember someone just on SNL saying like, David E. Kelly, you're married to Michelle Pfeiffer, like, go home. Why don't you want to sleep with your wife?
But that's what this movie's about too. Like, this is a David E. Kelly story. Every time Harrison Ford's at the lab, or when they're in bed and he's like, she has to beg him to sleep with her. You're just like, what is going on? This is Michelle Pfeiffer.
This is the most captivating woman in the world. But like,
even a supermodel is not as pretty as her. They had to find, to be her double, it had to be a supermodel, and still you're just like, eh.
The reason I bring this up is because, as you said, after this, she sort of starts to like soft retire. Like, I feel like there's this thing where it's like, okay, I Am Sam, and then White Oleander, where she's like a big part of the marketing campaign, but she's a large supporting part. And I remember there being this thing of like, oh, she's saying she might take time off. And then she doesn't do a movie for a while. And then it feels like post White Oleander, every time Michelle Pfeiffer's in a movie, it's positioned as a comeback. Whether it's been 3 years since she made a movie or 6 months since she made a movie, every time everyone's like, oh, thank God Michelle Pfeiffer's back. It never feels like she's fully like, I'm back to being a full-time actress.
No,
it always feels like she might never be in a movie ever again.
Yeah, and she starts to feel unrelatable to us as they're all unrelatable to us as movie stars, but there's a certain kind of movie star that I imagined her as. And then when she starts living the David E. Kelly life, I'm like, I don't know what this is. This is not who I thought she was. And and then I don't care anymore.
I also think she has that energy of people just are like, I'm talking about nerds, but still nerds like me, where it's like she hasn't won an Oscar, so anytime she's in a project with the vaguest prestige, people do sort of lean forward and they're like, well, could this be it? Like, is this the one? Like, she's usually good. These, like when she shows up in like Mother, she's a blast
she's
in
so
Mother.
fucking good in Mother.
Yeah.
Like recently it's like she's done Marvel movies. She's fun in Maleficent 2. I mean, it's kind of a bummer.
But that's like when she showed up in Mother, I feel like people were like, fuck, great. It's been so long since we've seen Michelle Pfeiffer.
That's
and
the
it's
one,
like, you're forgetting the 3 movies she's been in the last 5 years. It's not like she's been gone forever. She just doesn't seem to work all the time.
Well, Mother felt though like it felt like she's doing something different than those last, I don't know what those last 3 movies were, but I assume they were action-y, and it felt like she had made a decision on a comeback. Like, this is
Mother, it felt like she tapped into the real reserve. She was giving us the good shit for the first time in a while.
And we were so here for it.
Yeah.
She's in a movie called Where is Kyra that got like 0 release. It was a Sundance movie that just didn't, but that she is great in. And it's just unfortunately one of those movies that it's a very quiet indie drama. It didn't get picked up by the right studio or whatever, and that was that. But like, you see her in it and you're like, oh, right, she's absolutely, capable of a great lead performance anytime. Maybe
Have you seen French Exit, David?
She's fun in that. I mean, she's fun. I did not totally connect with that movie, but she's a total pro.
But she's when you say it's very rare for someone as beautiful as her to be as fun as she is. That is a distinguishing trait of hers. Is that she's so fun, and that I don't know how she's summoning something up. It's like she acknowledges her beauty. She knows her beauty, while like, I don't know, she's a good time.
There's also this weird X factor with her where it's like, it shouldn't be possible for someone as innately beautiful. Like, just like, she has glamorous bone structure. You can't make her dowdy, right? But she is able to convincingly play low status people and to remain relatable as a sympathetic audience character, like, where I feel like people who are her level of beauty often have that struggle where it's like, you can't accept them as an everyday person. It's just impossible.
It's because she seems like, I think part of it is because of Married to the Mob is when her first start. So she like cemented something about being like able to play a different class. And when I see her beauty, I feel like, oh, it's possible that you were the genetic anomaly in a
Sure.
family of non-beautiful people. Like she's so astoundingly beautiful that you don't
Yeah.
even know. It's a little bit like I've seen like Cindy Crawford's sisters, and I'm like, where Cindy Crawford just like something happened in those in
Yeah.
that cellular formation that made this extraordinary beauty. It's not like Kardashians, and so
Sure.
I buy it. And Michelle Pfeiffer, it's because she's not denying her beauty that makes me actually able to see her as so many different people. I can buy her as the beautiful woman in all different walks of life who always knew she was beautiful, and then the different ways that beauty finds paths in life.
It's also just fascinating, though.
Yeah.
No, what were you gonna say?
Well, what she was wearing in this movie, I did feel, because it was the era when it was like straight-legged,
Yeah.
not like straight-legged khakis with bootleg cut all the way down, a little bit past the ankle with this bootleg, and then like the kind of like sandals, platforms, Payless shoe style, like everybody was wearing kind of Payless shoes, no matter what your class was. It did hurt to see that on Michelle Pfeiffer. I felt like, how dare you put it on this goddess? Like that she had to live through this era and wear that stuff.
Did you folks notice that there was like a big, bold, sort of like, significantly spaced on its own in the end credits, like Harrison Ford's outfits designed by credit?
Oh.
No.
It
Good
was
for him.
very odd because she didn't get one and he got one, and it's not like he's wearing like fucking Tom Ford suits.
But maybe
in this
he
movie.
just
No.
he had some endorsement deal with like fucking Eddie Bauer that he like.
It
It's like
wasn't
Isn't
like
he
I
just
gotta.
wearing normal? He's
I was gonna say he's wearing like
Yeah, he's
t-shirts and
just wearing
pajama
normal
pants and
clothes.
shit. But I like didn't. It wasn't like a brand name I recognized. It was like, did he insist on bringing in his own like costume person who was like, Harrison's got very specific thread counts on his loungewear. Like
It might be.
I mean, there was,
It
again, that
genuinely
luxury.
might
There was
be.
a luxury feel to this movie that felt, the fact that they were Robert Zemeckis' for only choices, that he was like,
Yeah.
I want to make this movie and there's no one else who's going to be in this movie but them, made everything feel like the terms and conditions for people to be involved in this film.
I think that's how he honestly kind of still operates. Like, and I do think that's part of his continued clout in the industry, even though he doesn't make hits at the same rates. Is like movie stars will still work, like Brad Pitt, Tom Hanks, like are still just like, oh, okay, sure, Robert, Denzel, like Robert Zemeckis, okay, I'll do that. Like he, for whatever reason, I mean, because he made Back to the Future, Roger Rabbit, and Forrest Gump, like he will just get you the star.
Yeah. I was thinking about watching this and trying to place it in like the time. And there was that thing for a while where it was like, if you're an A-list movie star, you eventually have to work with all the A-list directors. And the mere teaming of one of those people with one of those people for the first time was enough to elevate any movie into being a blockbuster, being seen as a major tentpole release, regardless of what genre it was or what premise it was. Like the idea is it's like, oh fuck, it's like Harrison Ford in a Zemeckis movie for the first time. Like that meant something. Whether they ended up teaming up for a comedy, for an action film, for a psychological thriller, like that was the selling point, in the same way that I feel like Minority Report was the same thing of just like, fuck, Spielberg and Cruise are making a movie together. That's bananas.
That was the biggest. That's the biggest example of it, where it's like, wow, like would that happen now? I mean, Leo is probably the only one. Like that's about it.
But who would it be with?
Well, it already was. It was like, it just Tarantino. I think Leo.
Tarantinos.
I think him and Once Upon a Time was that. But I think that. But no one. The problem is, no one cares about anything anymore.
No.
If Cruise had done it,
that's what I was going to say.
Like as rumored, that would have maybe been enough. But like
I
that's
think
about it.
Tarantino works with blank is the only thing that potentially has that kind of power, and I think there's
Or
the
Paul
short
Thomas
list of
Anderson,
other.
maybe.
But here's the thing: Paul Thomas Anderson, I agree. Like we would get excited about, but none of his movies have been crossover successes. The difference is that Tarantino movies play like populist blockbusters. So it's the idea of like, if they announced tomorrow that Denzel was going to star in the next Tarantino movie, if Cruise was going to star in the next Tarantino movie, like there's that very short list of people who, if they were in a Tarantino movie, it would feel like holy fucking shit. In the same way that I think Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was largely sold as it's Pitt
and DiCaprio together. We know you've seen both of these guys separately work with
Yeah.
Tarantino, but look, two big movie stars. But I feel
Yeah.
like anyone outside of that, it's like there's certain people maybe, but even just like if they announced tomorrow that Scorsese's next movie was starring Denzel, it wouldn't feel as sort of like earth shattering. And other than him, Scorsese already worked with like Cruise. I mean, you talk about that tier of just like Cruise, Pitt, Denzel, who's the other
Tom
one I was
Hanks.
just thinking of? Hanks, Clooney, you know?
Well, it's because
Yeah,
Tom
Clooney.
Cruise is the epitome, is the best example though, because I'm always interested to see what Tom Cruise does, and I'm especially interested to see him do something that's not expected, like anything
Right.
that will give me a more Magnolia type surprise.
Right, which he stopped doing.
I know.
Like
Well,
he
that's-
has that great 15, 20-year run where he's like, I want to work with every big director. And then the last 5-6 years, he's like, I'm going to work with the same
three directors over and
yeah.
over again.
So he
Who
said
I
no to
like,
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? He was offered the part?
He
and
did. Yes.
Well, I mean, but then the version of it I heard is that like Tarantino had it set as like my casting options are in pairs. I would need both people to agree to do it. It was Cruise and someone else who I won't name. It was never going to be
Right.
Cruise and DiCaprio or Cruise and Pitt. Pitt and DiCaprio were a pair. Cruise and someone else was a pair. And there was maybe one other one he had. And it felt like, well, like the Pitt and DiCaprio were both equally on board and available. That worked out.
And Tom
but-
Cruise
but-
was going to be Brad Pitt's part. He was going to be the stuntman.
I've
Yes,
never heard
yes.
him make that clear,
No,
but that's
no,
the
he
assumption,
made it clear.
right?
He made it clear. It was going to be the Cliff Booth or whatever, right? That's what it's called.
Right. I mean, that would have
The
been
stuntman.
fucking thrilling.
It
mean,
would have
it-
been
it
cool.
really-
I mean, it would have been very
truly-
cool. I mean,
it's-
and Pitt is sensational in that movie. So, but like,
Right, he won a
would have been
fucking
very
Oscar.
Cool.
It
Right.
says so much that Pitt won an Oscar for it, and even still, we're like, but imagine how much
What could
better
have
it would be.
been.
Yeah.
What if Spielberg was going to make a real Spielberg movie now?
Mhm.
A real one that we could trust and be like, this is the one that he's been waiting for, and he's going to actually draw up, be Spielberg again. And he announced a cast. I would be excited still.
I also think part of it is now, like, in order to feel bigger than the blockbusters, these franchises that have been going on forever and ever that are sold on so much more than just who's at the center of them. You know, like characters and storylines and interconnected universes have become bigger than singular stars. And the people who are able to command the biggest paychecks are usually conditional, baked into one role. They're so much bigger in this one part or this one franchise than they are outside of it, that it's like you do kind of have to stack them up. You do have to go, it's Pitt and DiCaprio. It's
Yeah.
Pitt and Clooney and Damon. You know, it's Roberts and Hanks. Like,
And you also get excited by the combination. Like you want to
Right.
see them acting against each other, not just like having the most movie stars, not just like a Marvel
Right.
movie, but being like,
Yeah.
I'm interested to see how those two actors work against each other.
but that's the thing. Like I feel like the Spielberg announcement would have to be like 3 of those people together.
And
you
he'd have
know?
to promise that he was not going to use like any effect. Like it would have to be like also a commitment
Right.
to another kind of movie that he doesn't make anymore.
Well,
What
Bridge of Spies.
I didn't see it.
Yeah.
Is,
Oh,
You should
Starlee.
check out Bridge of Spies.
You
It's
got
so good.
you got to walk the bridge.
is it
You
actually
do.
good?
It's so good.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's a
It's
master.
good in a real way?
rules. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. One of our
Okay.
favorite movies of the last decade.
Okay.
Yeah.
And and he worked with Day-Lewis, he worked with Streep. Like
Yeah.
those were where it felt like he's checking off. I mean, he made those movies for more than just to check things off, but like,
Sure.
okay, I never worked with Meryl Streep. Like, let's finally
Mhm.
Yeah.
like collaborate, like stuff like that. But
So
it's true that it doesn't have the same buzzy kind of feel. I mean, it's also because these people are getting older. Like, I mean, which is
Yeah.
sort of sad to say, but
the sad part though is it's sad that they're getting older, but it's more sad that we only allowed a limited number of people in. So now we have to like be at the mercy of mortals who are aging.
Yeah.
Like, and then we also allowed things to fall apart in the last 20 years of filmmaking in a way where like we could have just kept going. We could have been like, okay, you're getting older. That's what happens. But instead,
It's also
we're
like
yeah, I mean, you talk about not letting people in. It's like so few actors have had a chance to become like full-fledged movie stars and not just like very valuable in this one sort of role, in this one
Well, yeah.
narrow genre, or whatever it is. And also it's partly like, oh, they spend like, most of their year making this big franchise. So then when they're not doing it, they want to take like the third lead on a Netflix show, which does
Yeah.
start to make people feel less special and iconic.
Oh,
Like, I don't
totally.
mean to be sort of like, sticking my nose up at TV, but and there are people who are able to like do both and retain their power in doing both. Like someone like Viola Davis, it's like, well, she still feels very high status and like a big movie star, despite spending like 7 seasons on an ABC procedural, because it was like a Viola Davis show. Like she brought the gravitas to it.
And
Yeah.
at this point, an ABC procedural is so much more high status than a Netflix show. Most of the Netflix,
Yeah.
she's able to retain her prestige in a way that like Hilary Swank now, I'm just like, whatever, you're just a Netflix. Like, even though I didn't watch all of Away, I only watched like half of the
Yeah.
pilot, but it feels like I no longer trust any of the things that are coming out, and it's reducing them in my mind even before I watch the thing.
I mean, I think the only two people who have kind of pulled it off in recent history in the last 10 years are Bradley Cooper and Jennifer Lawrence, to somewhat mixed degrees, but like it felt like both of them were like, oh fuck, they've somehow figured out how to be an old-fashioned movie star, and they both had franchises, but the franchises didn't become the overwhelming thing for them. They didn't become like, she's just Katniss, he's just fucking the Hangover guy. Like they had these hammocks of like very successful series, but like both of them also got to do their Marvel movies that didn't feel overpowering, where they were supporting characters, where it didn't like,
But he turned
overrun
himself
everything else.
into a movie star. Like he willed himself
Totally.
out of that. That's
You-
a
you
very,
feel
very
like-
rare
yes,
instance.
Absolutely. You can feel the effort in Bradley Cooper saying like, I am going to be DiCaprio. I'm going to be a movie star
Yes.
who works with high tier directors and like is able to make prestige films feel like blockbusters.
And I'm also going to become the high tier director.
Right. And Jennifer Lawrence, it feels like she went like too much too fast. Everyone got burnt out on her, has taken time off, and is now trying to like come back.
But I think Robert Pattinson is trying to do what she's doing. I just don't know if it's
Totally.
working because his movies aren't seen as much. But I definitely
Yes.
think he is trying to do that, and he takes very bold choices.
Pattinson's a weird thing because it's like massive franchise, then everything he does outside of the franchise bombs. Then he's like, let's wipe the slate clean. I want to play weirdos in tiny movies.
Yeah.
None of those movies are widely seen, but people start to build respect for him.
Yeah.
And then now he's Batman. And the
Yeah.
question is like, are people going to like him as Batman? And after Batman, is that going to translate to people wanting to see him do weirdo roles?
And is
Like,
he still
is-
going to want to
is-
do weirdo roles? Or is he going to have to do Batman and be like, this feels pretty good, this
that's
is pretty
the other
fun?
question.
Yeah.
Is Batman going to become his next Twilight until that ends, and then he goes back to making tiny weirdo roles? Like the balance is harder to do of making the non-franchise stuff feel as important to audiences as whoever the sort of a titular A-list franchise character you're playing is. I last night when I couldn't sleep, I watched the new season of the Netflix David Letterman show, which just came out, and because he has like a 45-minute hour-long Robert Downey Jr. episode, and I was just like, yeah, Downey Jr. just doesn't do shit like this anymore. I feel like he's so protective of his movie star image. The idea of watching him sit down and talk about his life for an hour feels weird. I want to see this. And David Letterman just sort of asked him point blank, he's like, so like, who are you now? Like, what do you do post Iron Man? Like, at a certain point, you're like everyone's favorite, like, oh, this guy's got all the potential, like young, exciting actor. Then you become dogged with like bad press, sort of like he's the most unstable. Is he gonna die? How long is he gonna end up in jail? Sort of dude. They pulls himself up and becomes like the biggest movie star. And then clearly kind of it becomes a gilded cage situation for him where he's terrified of doing anything outside of
Iron Man or anything outside of that budget level. And you're like, him ending Marvel on such a high note where everyone was like, you ended it on your terms. Your last one was this huge fucking triumph in people's eyes. And then you make Doolittle and it fucking sucks dog ass and everyone hates it. You know? Like, what do you do now?
He'd be an exciting one in a Tarantino movie.
He's another one.
He needs to work with a good director again. Like, that's what he needs to do.
Yes. If they announced him with any good director tomorrow, it would be thrilling.
It would be so exciting. And like he, you know, I mean, Fincher obviously got he was going to be in Inherent Vice, which is
right,
in my opinion, a better movie if he's in it. And I like Inherent Vice. Like, here's the thing that has had me thinking about him. I really like the HBO Perry Mason, which he spearheaded. I threw it on,
developed for him.
Yes, I threw it on months after it had finished or whatever, and with the caveat you sort of are told, like, look, you know, as with all these fucking prestige TV shows, it like takes like 3 episodes to warm up.
It's a 10-hour pilot.
Right. But it is so insanely specific and interested in things that no other TV show is interested in, like where it's basically like getting into all kinds of weird stuff that was going on in LA after the Depression, or really during the Depression. And it's written by these guys who wrote, you know, for Friday Night Lights, who wrote The Sun, which is the most famous episode of Friday Night Lights. Like, it is just clearly a no bullshit show that he was very invested in. And I'm like, why isn't he in this? Like, I almost wish this was something he had actually followed through. Like, there's obviously some point at which, and Matthew Rhys is really good, but there's some point at which he's like, well, that's obviously just going to be too much, so I'm not going to do that. Like, I'll just produce it. And I wish he had gone whole hog. Like, I wish he'd
Can I throw out my thought, and this sort of ties back to like the Harrison Ford thing as well. There is this sort of thing when people get to the very, very fucking top of the mountain in Hollywood. Not that they have to be number one pole position alone, but when they're in that upper echelon where it feels like people get very protective of like, I never want to lose this. I never want to get dinged from this. So you start to become more sort of like, you safeguard yourself from things that feel too risky, whether it's like this project feels too off, or I don't want to lose the veneer of I am a major blockbuster movie star. I don't want to star in something that feels smaller. I don't want to agree to ever take anything below my quote. Where it's like Harrison Ford would rather be like the fucking like grumpy old sheriff in Cowboys and Aliens than
for
be
$10
the
million.
lead. Right, then be the lead in a movie for $2 million that's better suited to his talents. Because
it's an
like,
actually good script. Yes.
This movie is going to make it feel like I'm a bigger deal because they're going to put so much energy into, look how much money we paid to have Harrison Ford stand at the side and go like, I don't like these aliens. You know?
Well, it's interesting because like Harrison Ford's age, you get to the point where you're like, if I make the wrong choice, it's the last movie I ever do because no one will ever put me in a movie again. And so there starts to be that kind of stakes. At Robert Downey Jr.'s age, what I don't understand is when you don't have money, you are forced to take jobs for money that you don't want to do. And the entire thing you're working towards is, I just want to have enough money so I can say no to this. Like, that is the dream. And I, as someone who has never made, real money, I don't understand why people do things that aren't good for money. Yeah. Because I've managed to live long enough not making any money, but making good things. So it always so I'm like, you can actually be a person who does this. But they're in the exact opposite situation where they have all the money in the world and they keep saying no to the bad things so that they can keep getting paid. It just doesn't make any sense to me. That is the freedom that you earn from having money.
And like Ford will take more chances. Downey Jr., I feel like what he's saying when he answers that Letterman question is, I'm trying to decide whether the most important thing for me is retaining the idea that I need to get paid $20 million for a movie. Because if that's the case, I'm going to be making more shit like Doolittle. I hope it's better than Doolittle, but no one's going to pay me $20 million to be in a PTA movie. It has to be movies that seem like they can play just as well with 5-year-olds in China, right? They have to be movies that at least have the potential to be that kind of like billion-dollar thing. Versus, do I just give it up? Do I say, I've made ungodly amounts of money, I'm in the annals of blockbuster history for playing this fucking humongous character in this unprecedented blockbuster franchise? Do I just go, cool, I'll do anything Fincher wants to do for any amount of money now? I don't need it. Let me just be good again.
But that's the thing is, like, it's not about, he's not giving up money. He's going to have money forever. So to me, he's being like, I'm giving up the idea that people see me as Iron Man. If I do the wrong movie, my legacy is actually my last, what they start to know me as a loser instead of a winner.
Yes.
It's separate from the money.
That is perfectly put. It's also this thing I think of, like, if you get to the top of the mountain, what you start to fight against isn't your rivals, your peers. You're not fighting to get jobs. You're fighting against the idea of what your legacy is.
Yeah.
Like, you start, I feel like, going, okay, but how am I going to stack up to Gary Cooper?
Mm-hmm.
Like, when I'm dead, how is my filmography going to get looked at as a whole? And the reality is, like, you know, Harrison Ford, if he died tomorrow, he will always be Han Solo and Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, Robert Downey Jr. will always be Iron Man. And they've also given great performances in smaller films and bigger films and what have you. But it's just like, they feel just fucking safe from that. They shouldn't have to feel like, is there anything I could do in the next decade plus that would ruin my legacy? Because you can't.
At least with Robert Downey Jr., I understand, because he had such a huge career, then he went through that rocky period just personally. I could see him being like, Iron Man is my comeback story of overcoming it all and being this strong guy. And if I do another thing past that, they're just going to be like, that guy's washed up. And there's like a psychological trap that he's made for himself. Because really what he should be remembered for, as much as Iron Man, is Chaplin and lessons there and his whole... And there's also a thing that's happened. Harrison Ford is lucky because he has Indiana Jones and Star Wars is going to live on. It's going to outlive everything in terms of memory. But a lot of what I've noticed, one of the strangest parts of living through this time is because we don't rent movies anymore and because streaming exists, a lot of movies are lost to time now. When I was little, I could watch old movies. People don't watch old movies anymore because there's so much new content and you can't find everything. And so I do think his legacy is being replaced with Iron Man in a way that it shouldn't be. But even then, he's Iron Man.
I agree. And I mean, to get back, circle back around, it is the thing as we're going through this that makes Zemeckis feel so interesting to me, is just like, he seems kind of unconcerned with these questions. As much as I believe that every time he makes a movie, he's hoping it's a big blockbuster hit, he has never made a movie that I think he didn't believe had the potential to be a populist crossover thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You know, even his most bizarre films, he's convinced are going to be like, because if you make things as weird as fucking Roger Rabbit and Back to the Future and Forrest Gump that become blockbusters, you start to go like, I can will anything into becoming mainstream.
That's what The Walk is. That's what Marwen is.
Right.
He's like, this is something that people don't know that they want, but they're going to love it.
This is why there should be a job. I often think it should be my job, that where you get away, where you save the people from themselves. Like that's a good instinct. Him taking those chances, him making different kinds of films. It's not that, I always forget that movie's called. What's the Steve Carell one?
Welcome to Marwen.
Yeah, so I saw that Christmas Day in the theater. So it's not that I don't want him to do that. It's that I want him to let the people in who say, we need to actually talk about your instincts and tell you how to get... everything should be like Jerry Maguire, where the speech about, I know you for the man that you could be. Like, that's what I feel about these people, because they do have to be saved from themselves in order to become themselves and be the greatest versions of themselves.
This is such a fascinating movie through that prism of like, here's 3 heavy hitters all like at the final stages of their no one questions them status.
Mm-hmm.
And also the end of studios being willing to greenlight $100 million movies based on 3 undeniable people
Mhm.
and willing them into becoming blockbusters. And as you said, Starlee, it's like I'd rather see him make a bad movie that's risky
Yeah.
than agree to do The Flash because he can and he could
That's
probably
that's what I was going to bring up. When he
Yeah.
was considering The Flash, I was like, it's over, man. Like, if
it's over.
even
Yeah.
Zemeckis is like, fuck it, I'll do a DC Universe movie. Like, it like Raimi doing Doctor Strange. No offense to Raimi. Like,
Yeah.
I'm excited or whatever. Like, whatever. I'm happy he's making a movie, but it does kind of just feel like, okay, all right. They're just like, well, what fun
That's
thing
a
can I
paycheck.
do within this? Yeah.
But
you
you're
know?
also like the bigger bummer is that Raimi has only done one movie out of like the big franchise machinery in the last 20 years. It's 3
Yeah.
Spider-Man and Oz reboot
Yeah.
and Drag Me to Hell. And it's
Mhm.
like you wish, even if they were disastrous, that Raimi had made a Welcome to Marwin. You know, that Raimi
Yeah.
had
Yeah.
made a Flight or whatever.
But
that
it's
he-
like,
yeah.
then maybe you don't get to make another one, I guess, is the fear. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's all
Look.
the question of right. How do you make sure you don't lose that status, which is a fear that is silly.
Oh, phone ringing. Picking it up. Click. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. There's a soft-spoken gentleman on the other end of the line.
Get off my bed.
Harrison
Off
Ford.
my bed.
Or
Yes,
wait a second.
me, Harrison Ford.
Okay, so I'm not talking to President. Jeez. I wish I could remember your name. I think it's James Marshall.
Harrison
James
Ford.
Marshall.
James Harrison Ford. Oh, well.
That's your
Don't
character
mean
in
I
Air
could've
Force One.
sworn my character's name was Harrison Ford.
No. So this is Harry Ford himself.
This is indeed. I'm stoned out of my mind.
Of course, you're a chiller. You're a maximum chiller, and we respect it.
And I got something very serious to talk about today.
Okay, so it's not about what lies beneath.
It is about what lies beneath my
Okay.
sheets.
Oh, I see what you're doing there.
I lie beneath my sheets. David.
That's true. Many of us do when we sleep, and some mornings you wake up feeling ready to pull the covers over your head and go back to sleep. So wouldn't you want those to be the most comfortable sheets if you're going to do that?
I would. I'm a very comfortable guy.
You are. You seem to emphasize comfort, except for when, of course, you're flying small planes into, mountains or whatever it is. You're always getting in trouble.
But, David, what you don't know is when I crash my plane, there's always Brooklyn in aboard.
Oh, Brooklyn Inn. Oh, longtime friends of the show. Started by Rich and Vicky, who wanted to find beautiful home essentials that didn't cost an arm and a leg. So you're a fan of their luxury sheets that are not charged at luxury level markups?
Why do you think I always step off those planes unscratched?
Right, because of the 5,000 5-star reviews, the variety of colors and patterns and materials. There's all kinds of choice.
Cloaked in immense Brooklyn.
Now wait, that's Abraham Lincoln. You never played him.
No, I just like quoting movies. And frankly,
sure,
my
you're-
David, I don't give a damn.
You're a movie fan. We it's the same. We got a lot in common. We both like movies. We both like Brooklyn and
Wah, wah, wee, wah, David.
wow, great success. Okay. I mean, I love my Brooklyn and I've got the sheets, I got the towels, I got the bath mats, I have a bath robe, I got pajamas, all kinds of soft, cheap Brooklinens. I assume you're a fan too, Harry. Griffin, I know you love your Brooklinen.
Oh, I love my Brooklyn. It's absolutely. I recently was thinking about going back for some more. I just constantly get the itch to get even more Brooklyn in my house. I never regret it. I never regret having more on hand and trying out new products from them. They always seem to improve my quality of life.
Here's the thing. You're getting the itch, but the sheets won't give you the itch because they're soft.
Correct.
Don't wait, Harrison. Do something nice for yourself. Go to brooklinen.com and use promo code CHECK to get 10% off your first order and free shipping. That's BROOKLINEN.com and enter promo code CHECK for 10% off your first order plus free shipping. brooklinen.com. Use promo code CHECK at checkout.
And just remember that I lie beneath the Brooklyn, and that was the bridge to this ad.
we gotta play the box office game, guys.
Yeah.
We gotta play the box.
Can I
office
just say
game.
two things very quickly?
Yes.
One, after watching the trailer for this movie, where they reveal everything, that he had the affair, that the ghost is of the woman he had the affair with, sleeping, I then was reminded the fucking Scary Movie 2 is so much about what lies beneath. And the trailer for Scary Movies 2, that was also the money shot, was like someone's having sex with Tim Curry and Anna Faris, I think. And then he says, who? And then he leans in and becomes like fucking Marlon Wayans or whatever. He becomes one of the Wayans brothers.
Oh, yeah.
It's just odd that this film was that culturally like tapped in for one moment.
Yeah,
That not only was
yeah.
the film this big, but a parody movie was like getting its fucking shine off of parodying it specifically, and then gone. Never talked about again.
And again, and forgotten. Like, I
Yeah.
remember all the twists from every random psychological thriller I ever saw, and this was not like that wasn't clattering
Right.
around my brain.
But like a year later, the movie was iconic enough that they were like, this is one of the 3 major thrillers that we're parodying in this sequel. The other thing I want to say, not a March spotlight, but I worked once with a hairdresser. I was making small talk on a set and was asking her about like things she's worked on, and she told me like, yeah, I always like to like collect things from the things I work on whenever they have like set dressing sales or prop sales. I always try to
Griff,
get little mementos from the film. What, have I told this story before?
But so many years ago. But I remember this story. I believe you told it like during the like Star Wars days. If it's about the bathtub. which I
Yeah,
assume
yeah.
it is,
And I
yes.
was like, so like, what do you have? And she was like, little things, the bathtub from what lies beneath. And I was like, you have the bathtub from what lies beneath? Like, I hadn't seen it. And I was like, that's the fucking poster. That whole movie's about the bathtub, right? And she was like, yeah, someone made a massive mistake. They were not supposed to give that to me. I mean,
Which
you
are the
saying Starlee, that they
bathtubs?
built multiple bathrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess they had multiple bathtubs, but it's still just insane that she just has that in her house.
But didn't you tell me like she couldn't even use it? Like that
Yes.
it was not functional. It was
right,
just
it's like a freestanding
right.
clawfoot bathtub. She was like, I can't figure out how to hook it up in my house. It would cost too much money. I just have it as decoration in the middle of a room. The bathtub
I
where
mean,
Harrison Ford almost
that's
murders
cool.
his wife.
It's such an important prop. It's like having the Winnebago in your house from Breaking Bad.
It's the titular role.
Yeah.
Yes. Box office game.
Okay, so no, it was. I mean, this is July 21st, 2000. It was
Wow.
obviously number 1 at the
Yeah.
box office. You mentioned Scary Movie 2. Guess what else is in this box office?
Scary Movie 1.
Yes, it's number 4. Just I 3 weeks. Just absolutely. People forget like a true sensation.
Humongous.
One of the
Yeah.
biggest R-rated hits of all time. Like
Right.
when it came out.
So big that they
Um,
make the sequel from beginning to end in like 6 months because they're like, we need
That's
to
what I'm
strike
saying.
while the
Like that's how
iron is
quick.
white hot.
Because
Yeah.
Scary Movie 2 is 2001. Like they turn it
Yes.
around
Wow.
immediately. That's partly probably why it has a What Lies Beneath
They don't
joke.
start
They're
writing
like,
it
well,
until January. It comes out in July.
Mhm.
Yeah.
all right. All right. What Lies Beneath is number 1. The movie was a big hit. It opens to 30 million. It made 300 worldwide. It's a
Huge.
big hit.
Yeah.
What's number 2, Griffin? It's a movie that portends many of the trends we were dismayed about in this episode.
Is it the movie X-Men?
It's X-Men.
Number 1.
Yes.
It is the first X-Men, which if you
Mm.
watch it now feels like a goddamn art movie compared to
Yes.
what followed, because
Yeah.
there's not a lot of money on the screen in that
No.
movie, and it has this
weirdly
very
austere.
weird, yeah, and it has this like leather and steel aesthetic
Yeah.
that is like just kind of cutesy to look at now. I mean, it's not whatever. It's a
bizarre.
funny movie.
Yeah.
All right, number 3 at the box office is a film I saw in an empty movie theater. It's an animated film. It's opening to $20 million.
Fully animated?
Yep.
From 2000. Is it a Disney movie?
No.
Is it an art animated?
No.
And it's not a DreamWorks, is it?
No. No.
Is it is it like a adaptation of something?
It's a sequel.
It's a sequel. It's a
Mm-hmm.
a 2000s animated sequel that you saw
Gar-
alone, but
Garfield kind of.
No. No. I mean, like, not a movie you guys could ever even. David. I
David. I
What?
gave
Go
myself the
ahead.
biggest clue talking through it.
It was an animated sequel from the year 2000. Of course, it has to be Pokemon the Movie 2000.
I mean, it's right there in the name.
One of the funniest titles ever.
Why was the theater empty?
Why was it titled that? Why was it titled Pokemon the Movie 2000? Oh, why was the theater empty? I think people were just not that hyped about seeing Pokemon the Movie 2000, I guess. I don't know. I took my brother.
Why is it titled that?
In Japan it was called like Pokemon 2 or whatever, and then 99 is Pokemon the first movie, and then this comes out like 9 months later, and there was that trend of putting 2000 in titles,
right? But the New York Times review said like it's called Pokemon the first movie, which feels like a threat.
Yes.
And like this is very much like where they're like, there's gonna be one of these a year, guys. And this is the 2001.
Right, that's the thing. It feels like a model number. It doesn't even feel like a sequel. It's like this is the 2017 Jetta.
And then there's basically only one more that I think they really mounted a significant American theatrical release. Like, that died off pretty fast. But this one certainly opened big. Yeah. It drops off, but like, I mean, this movie made $130 million worldwide. Like, it was a hit.
How many weeks into it did you see it then for it to be an empty theater?
It can't have been opening weekend because surely there would have been people there for that. I don't remember. I just remember it is an empty theater experience.
Why did you go see it?
I like Pokemon.
David loves Pokemon.
There you go.
I was all in. All in. I mean, what am I? I'm 14 years old at this point, and I'm still like, I'll sneak in the Pokemon movie. Why not?
See, and I love bullshit for babies, but I distinctly remember like Pokemon the movie, the first movie, October 99, all in, mega event. By the time Pokemon the movie 2000 comes out, I'm like, I'm over Pokemon.
Which is what happened. It's what happened. That's why by 3, it's like, okay, I guess these just go to video.
Right, Miramax is releasing it now. Yeah.
Right. Number 4 is Scary Movie. Number 5 is another grown-up blockbuster that is pretty good. Movie for grown-ups. I mean, it's not like What Lies Beneath. It's a special effects driven, thriller, very intense movie, but it is absolutely a movie for grown-ups, and I don't know that it would get made now. I don't know, maybe it would.
Is it like a big movie star, big director movie like this?
Big movie star. At the time a big director, although he's nearing the end of his Hollywood dominance or whatever.
Is it a genre film?
Kind of.
Is it The Perfect Storm?
It's The Perfect Storm.
There we go.
Clooney, Wahlberg, Wolfgang Peterson. I mean, like, what do you call that? It's not really a genre movie. It's like based on a bestseller.
I don't know if grown-up movie's the first description though of it though, because it's an action movie.
Kind of, but it's also
it's
this like
disaster
movie, right? Yeah.
Because like it's really just guys on a boat being like, what do we do? And then they die.
Right.
But disaster comes before grown up.
Sure.
It's one of the few Clooney movies where he's just like, it's not, I mean, Wolfgang Peterson is obviously a major director, but he's not working
movie
with an
star
RD
for hire.
director.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's good. Like, he's like, and I'm sure it was a pain in the ass to make. Like, they're in some fucking tank getting water dumped all over them for months. Like, it must have sucked.
I also think, Starlee, like, the difference is, like, most disaster movies are, like, here's Tommy Lee Jones, he's going to fight a volcano, right? It's like, here's a big movie star, and you're going to see them triumph over the odds. And Perfect Storm is, like, a disaster movie based on a true story where everyone knows the ending is bad. Like, it's not like, here's how these guys survived this. It's not even Captain Phillips, where it's like a story of everyday heroism. It's this weird, like, summer release. The poster is a small fishing boat getting engulfed by a wave. And everyone was like, fuck yeah, I want to see these guys die. I want to see how these guys grapple with their mortality.
I didn't know they died. And so when I saw it, I was devastated. And I found them, I wasn't even that into the movie itself, but I still find the end unbearably sad. I can't watch it. It's intense. And it's so sad. I think the ending is the best thing. The way it's done is really, really, really well done. And I had no idea. I did not know they died.
I've never seen it, and that's an ultimate. I mean, I knew it died. I knew they died, but that's the ultimate. Like, me at this age, I absolutely will never see that movie. That's going to stress me out too much.
Now I'd
It's
probably
just so
like
sad. They make it
Yeah, it's good.
because it's also an imagined fate. I mean, we know the fate, but it's imagined last moments. They don't know what the last
Yeah.
moments are. So what he chooses to make the last moments be, I thought was really good, smart.
it. Fuck,
very
now I need
sad.
to watch Perfect Storm.
It's not a bad movie. Not a bunch of character
everything-
actors in sweaters, wet.
And again, everything that is made from those kind of movies, that, in comparison to the movies that are made now, they all
Yeah.
just seem automatically better.
Starlee, thank you so much for being on the show. What an interesting series of conversations this movie unhooked.
Provoked.
Yeah, it is one of those movies where you have to think about like the entire history of Hollywood films by watching it, like what it was coming out of and how it disappeared and all of that.
It's a real time capsule, and it really makes you wonder. It just made me think so much about the space of the last 20 years and what happened. Because
Yeah.
this shouldn't have been an ending point, not only
No.
for these actors, but also not for this type of movie. And it kind of wasn't
The lack of a healthy, balanced ecosystem in
Yeah.
American
Yes.
movie making. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I don't think things are going to get better post-pandemic. Election profit makers continuing past the election. This episode will be coming out past election as well. But hopefully the show is fun for you to keep doing at that point, if you catch my drift. I don't want to say anything because I don't even want to speak the words.
It's a great show. It's a great show.
Thank you.
It's
you.
brought
Great
me
show.
much comfort in a time of stress, in an electoral moment of stress.
It's replaced the psychological thriller genre.
Yes.
Yes.
It is now providing the comfort that those once provided.
And if you want to watch a comedy with elements of psychological thriller, watch Search Party, which is on HBO Max and gives both Starlee and I residual payouts. So feel free to watch all 3 seasons of that show, and season 4 coming sometime soon.
Less now that it's on streaming, but yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. You're also truly, I think, my favorite part of Search Party. Your
Oh.
performance on it. I'm not just
Thank
saying
you.
that. It's the best.
That's my favorite performance I've given, and I've spent
Yeah.
the following years trying to get anyone to hire me to do something like that again. And instead,
So
people just
good.
want me to fucking drop coffee cups.
Mm.
Anyway,
They're wrong. See, they just need to ask me what's right and wrong, and I will tell them.
let's start the
ingredients
campaign
are
now.
all there.
Yeah.
Like, just
Starlee Kine
if-
for grand arbiter of entertainment industry. It's an elected position.
Exactly. The living tribunal of Hollywood, just with like scales than she weighs.
It's just showing if the stuff already exists, being like more like this, less like that of this person's work.
Yeah, I also just like talking about all this shit. It's like I'd rather play stuff where it's playing off the fact that I seem non-threatening, and I'm able to subvert that than playing some guy who looks like he's gonna be fucking frazzled.
It's so subtly done. I really do love. I've watched your episode so many times. I remember the conception of your episode. I remember seeing your episode, and it is just. I mean, that you were in several episodes, but the dinner party. I think it is. You're so great in it. I'm not just saying that.
Thank you. That means a lot to me. Well, now I feel weird ending the show, but thank you for saying the very nice things that you just said. And thank you all for listening. And please
Sorry.
remember to rate, review, subscribe. No. I just don't know how to take compliments. Go to blankies.red.com for some real nerdy shit. And go to patreon.com/blankcheck for blank check special features, where we're watching the Alien movies, other tense movies starring adults, although films that pretend more the future of franchise-obsessed filmmaking. Thanks to Lee Montgomery for our theme song, Joe Boy and Pat Rounds for our artwork, Andrew Gudo for our social media and for helping produce the show. Tune in next week for Castaway with Nia DaCosta, director of the upcoming Candyman movie, and Captain Marvel 2 agreed to be on our show. So tune in for that next week. I think it's a really fun ep. And as always, Harrison Ford smiles weird.